little scrap always brings home the story. This is crap. Rewrite.
Down in the building, please. Victoria. Roll call.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Councilmember Barron.
I can't hear her.
We couldn't hear you, Yashin.
We can't hear you, Yashin.
Yashin, you're muted. Oh, here we go.
Councilmember Barron?
Here.
Councilmember Perdido?
Here.
Councilmember Tice?
Here.
Mayor September Schwartz?
Here.
Mayor Clark?
Here. Alrighty. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag
States
of the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
one
under God,
nation,
indivisible, with liberty
indivisible,
and justice for all.
justice for all.
Thank you. Well done. Alrighty, we get down to business now. Extraordinary business. Jeff Barron, Community Vibrancy Report.
Thank you, Dave. I think we have a presentation somewhere. I'll try to keep this a little bit short. This is mostly just a report of the council and the community about some activities that Victoria and I undertook at the beginning of the year. I had this idea of getting the community together and trying to figure out what makes a vibrant community. So we had 3 sets of meetings in January, February.
Excuse me, sir. Yashin, are you going to project this, or should we have someone in the chambers do it?
Mic and the speaker.
Yeah, you were just low.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brandon, would you be so kind? I think it's on this machine.
Oh. Hold on. Sorry, so like technical problems. Hold on.
Yeah, we need one.
I think she has it, Brandon.
Okie dokie. Oh, okay. So I'm just going to talk about, briefly talk about the 3 meetings that we had. We started at the beginning of January. Next slide. We started at the beginning of January with 2 questions. What makes Carmel a community? Thank you. What makes Carmel the community that we like? What makes it a vibrant place to live? And then what would improve our community? And it became clear to us during the first meeting that there was some sentiment in the room that led us to this sort of 2B question: how can we stem the tide towards a community, towards being a community in name only? So what differentiates us? We all talk about the Carmel community, but how do we not become sort of a shadow of what we were? Next slide. So after the first meeting, Victoria and I took a bunch of notes, and after the first meeting, I simply took the notes that I had taken and plugged them into a program that generates a word cloud. A word cloud. And this is what you get. So this is what we got. Housing affordability was the issue that a lot of people in the room talked about. I would say there were probably 25 people at the first 2 meetings. Other things that people talked about: second homes, parking and traffic, short-term rentals, code enforcement, locally owned shops, renters, and you can see a bunch of little things. This was a very open-ended meeting. We provided very little direction other than simply asking the questions that I spoke about earlier. So very free form, people introduce themselves, and this is what turned out. And we thought after I did this exercise of putting this thing together, that this was an accurate representation of what was said at the meeting. And I want to emphasize while we're looking at this chart, the word in the middle is housing affordability, not affordable housing. And I don't mean to imply that affordable housing in sort of the legal sense is not something that people think about. But what we heard at the meeting was that everybody is having a hard time finding an affordable place to live here. You know, we've had some experiences, the council has had some experiences trying to hire a police chief who can't afford to live in the area. So this sort of phenomenon of people not being able to afford housing here seems to cut across all income levels. Next slide. At the second meeting, we reviewed these sort of list of community attributes, and we divided them into these sort of categories to make sure that we were sort of on the right track. You know, housing obviously was the biggest one. We talked about diversity. Our community is becoming less diverse with fewer renters, fewer families, shop owners, and employees that don't live in town. All these things that we think of when we talk about vibrant communities are things that seem to be on the downslope. We talked about affordability necessary for the functioning of the downtown community. I know Carrie and I have had conversations, a lot of hoteliers and restaurants have had conversations about their inability to find people to work at their establishments because these people can't afford to live. Not only can they not afford to live in Carmel, they can't even afford to live in the outlying communities, and they end up in Salinas, or they end up in much worse situations than that. And by Salinas, I mean far away. You know, people with an hour commute down Highway 1. We talked about housing. So we talked about fundraising programs, vacancy fees on underutilized residences, as we see as there exists in Oakland, as just is qualifying for the ballot in Santa Cruz, as exists in Vancouver, and is getting ready to be qualified for the ballot in San Francisco. We talked about real property transfer taxes. So some communities tax expensive homes to fund affordable housing, and the like. And all of these things have issues. These are just ideas on a piece of paper. We haven't made any movement towards doing any of this stuff. These are just conversations that we've had. We talked about the downtown community, what it means to live in Carmel and have access to this downtown, what would increase the connection between the people that live in downtown and the business community that works here, the business community that sort of exists in downtown. Larger connection to residential community via programs targeted to residents, local ownership of businesses. We actually do have probably a dozen or so businesses in town that are owned by people that live in town. Councilmember Tice is a perfect example of that. There are a number of retail shops that are owned by people in town. The list sort of goes on. One of the things that people thought was also important was getting folks out of their homes. This is not, the community I think that we all love here is not a community of suburban houses where people disappear into their houses. So we talk about how to get people out. Parking and traffic, if you remember from the first list, is a really important thing to a lot of people. We talk about bikes. I promise that's not just me. We talk about block parties. I know that there are a number of blocks around town that have fairly active block community organizations. We talked about maybe being able to foster that. And then we talked about volunteer efforts. Carmel Cares, which we'll see is a perfect volunteer effort. And there are a number of these volunteer efforts around town. Next slide. And then we talk about, at the third meeting, we talked about linking solutions to the issues that we've identified. We talked about housing where employers provide housing. Montage is the perfect example of an employer that is trying to get doctors to live in town. We all have doctor stories. Everyone in this room has a doctor story about their inability to find a doctor, or I heard the other day about someone with an 8-month wait to see a dermatologist. Montage is subsidizing doctor housing for doctors. The Pebble Beach company has an affordable housing unit over by Pacific Grove and some land that they own. There's city-sponsored housing or city-aided housing, which a lot of communities do. Either the city might provide a land, like, for example, the Sunset Center parking lot, or acquire some land, or the city already owns some land, which we've talked about before, at some blank intersections in town in the residential areas. Those properties could be developed. And we also talked about renters assistance. So either assistance to renters that, you know, for example, city employees providing assistance to city employees that can't afford to live in the city, or downtown commercial employees that also can't afford to live in the city, or turning that sort of on its head and providing assistance to homeowners. So for example, in South Lake Tahoe, there is actually a program that aims to convert older housing stock into housing for seasonal workers, for summer seasonal workers, and then winter seasonal workers, and they actually pay the homeowners in these communities to repurpose these old vacation homes into affordable housing stock. And then we talked about these fundraising programs I spoke a few minutes ago. We talked about housing and zoning incentives. A lot of this stuff is going to come up when the council and the planning commission and everybody for that matter discusses the housing exercise that we're going to do in association with the RENA numbers. I'm going to ask Jip when that's going to start, but I'll ask him that later. That will occupy the second half of this year and probably all of next year. We talked about programs to incentivize occupied ADUs. So we're seeing a lot of ADUs being built in town, but I suspect most of them are being used to simply make the houses bigger. How do we get people into these ADUs? You know, the ADU laws were created to increase the housing stock, not to allow someone with an 1,800-foot house, a 1,600-foot house, to build a 2,200-foot house. When we get to downtown, we talk about sort of support of downtown programs that benefit the local community. So for example, one of the things that I've seen here since I've been here is a sort of lack of happy hour pricing. You know, it seems like when I moved here, you know, when we came here back in 2005 or 2010, there were a number of places where you could go have dinner before 6 o'clock, and those opportunities seem to have sort of dried up. I think they were perfect. You know, I know as I've gotten older, I've started eating earlier, and now those opportunities seem to not exist. And then we talked about other one-off programs. We briefly talked about Carmel Cares. Carmel Cares has a life of its own, which is really fantastic, so they don't need any taken care of. I have my little Carmel Neighbors program, which we've talked about, which I've talked about before. Next slide. So the next steps, this is what we hope to do. We hope to have another meeting. We tentatively set for May the 20th to review the progress. So we have groups that have sort of been, you know, nebulously assigned to have sort of volunteered to work on these topics and to produce little white papers for us to talk about, to talk about as a group. And then we're trying to figure out what future meetings might look like, whether they're social hours, whether we try to form an incubator or whatever they are to sort of foster community projects moving forward, to try to provide a space in which little projects like this that are sort of funded or sourced by the community can exist and sort of gather momentum before they sort of go out on their own. So this is what we're up to. Thanks. I would like to thank the American Legion for the use of their property. They were very generous in that. Victoria, I think Victoria is sitting back in the back, for facilitating these meetings and helping me with all of this work. And then all of the people who attended our 6 meetings. I think the number was somewhere between 40 and 50. It was great hearing from you, and we really do look forward to hearing from you again. So that is the summary. Thank you for the time.
Jeff, thank you for the hard work you've done and created a great template for the future of Carmel. Much appreciated. All righty, why don't we move on then to the next item? Jeff, I mean, it's sincerely hard work. Well done. Maybe a block party would be a good idea. Proclamation recognizing May 15th to the 21st of 2022 as National Public Works Week. Ready and resilient. Chip, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, recognizing the coming week of May 15th through the 21st as National Public Works Week. Ready and resilient, and our Public Works Director, Mr. Harari, is here. I'm going to read a couple of the whereases and then cut to the chase. The proclamation reads, whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, parks, and services that are vital to the importance and sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea to gain knowledge of and to maintain a progressive interest and understanding of the importance of public works programs and services in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2022 marks the 62nd annual National Public Works Week sponsored by the American Public Works Association, now therefore be it proclaimed that I, Dave Potter, Mayor of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea, do hereby designate the week of May 15th through the 21st, 2022 as National Public Works Week. I urge all citizens to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association to pay tribute to our public works professionals, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protect our city's health and welfare and the safety of our citizens. And the mayor's signature and seal is below. So I want to thank our Public Works staff. They're the ones that are out when a storm is rolling in. They're the ones mucking out drains and dealing with dangerous trees and dealing with pesky little federal laws like the Clean Water Act and fighting for dollars with me and with the council to maintain our infrastructure. So please, the next time you see a Public Works professional, whether they're in a uniform or not, like the two up here, Agnes and Bob, please thank them for what they do. And again, we celebrate you and your team during Public Works Week, May 15th through the 21st. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chip. Bob, well done. Honestly, you guys stand in harm's way, whether it's the men and women on your team. You're really out there in the front line of creative process for the city. You also are the only group that actually create anything. You know, you do roads. We're a public service organization, but you do actually get out there and create some projects, so much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you. All righty, why don't we move on to item number C then, which is introduction of Winter and Company and early guidance from council on the Design Traditions 1.5 project. Brandon? Nori?
Since I've worked here for a year and 4 months, it's all been virtual, and this podium is just as short as I feared it was. So I'm going to talk about the creation by my department, because we create things too, not just public works, of the Carmel-by-the-Sea Design Traditions 1.5 project. Sorry, Bob, had to do it. So I'm just here today really as a brief introduction so you can meet the man, the myth, the legend, Nori Winter. He's going to talk to you a little bit about his company, what they do, the process we're going to go through. And at the end of this, I'm going to give away the ending. We're going to ask you two simple questions. One, what are the big design issues that you see need to be addressed by this project? And two, when we're all sitting around a table in a year from now and we're talking about what a great success this has been, what does that success look like? So keep that in mind as we're going through today. We're going to hopefully hear some of that from the public as well. I do want to take just a quick second and let you know that a few of our wonderful dedicated steering committee members are here in the audience today. They won't be coming up and giving their feedback. We already ran this exercise with them, but they're here because they're so dedicated. They're going to be at all of our public meetings, taking notes, and helping to provide the feedback from the position of the residents throughout the process. Not writing, they're not developing the project itself, but they're acting as sort of like the watchdogs and the stewards of the village as residents first and then experts second. So with that, I'll move on to the next slide here. Just giving you a quick overview of the scope. As I mentioned, we're updating the residential design guidelines and the commercial design guidelines, and also the zoning code amendments. Because those all go together. The zoning code implements the designing guidelines. The community is going to be engaged throughout this entire process. That's really how we win this, is making sure that this is the community's project. It's not Brandon's design guideline project. It's not the city council's design guideline project. It's the community's design guideline project. So we're very excited about engaging the community often on this. And we'll come back to that slide. Just really briefly, the project team, so you know who's working on this. We have our city planning staff. For me, philosophically, everyone on my team is going to be working on it. I have 4 planners right now. They're all going to be involved in this. We're all at different points in our career, and everyone has different opinions and aspects of their background that can lend to this. And I really want to get them all involved. So we're all going to be involved in this. We obviously have Winter and company, and then we have our steering committee that you all appointed. So that's the team. The stakeholders really, I think, are part of the team as well. And I've started to message this out there. I talked to the CRA about this. I want people to get involved. And I think this is really important in how we're going to get through this successfully. Of course, number one, that's the community. It's residents, it's business owners, it's community groups, anyone that has a stake in this village. It's you, it's the city council. We're going to get really good feedback and guidance from you. It's the planning commission, and it's the historic resources board. So I'm going to bring up the man, the myth, the legend, as I said, Mr. Nori Winter, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about himself, about what the project is going to look like, the resources we're going to pull from, and then I'll come back up and ask you those questions at the end. So with that, Nori Winter.
Nori, welcome. Good to have you in the house again. Welcome home.
Thank you, and it does feel like home. It's 20 years ago today, and you can follow through on the lyrics maybe. Some of us will recognize that. It does feel great to be back. 20 years ago, we did work on the original Design Traditions project with the community here, and have a lot of wonderful information from that we're able to bring back into this process today. And in the interim, I've done a little bit of traveling. This is my frequent flyer strategy map. And we've been able to work with a variety of communities across the country, large and small, some of them very special in their character, all of which have cared about their communities. And we've learned a lot, and we're bringing that message and that information back here. We know we can't rubber stamp it and do a save as. There is not another community like Carmel-by-the-Sea, but we can use a lot of the tools that we've learned and adapt them to our use here. And I'm going in the wrong direction. As I mentioned, we have, as a starting point, we have the existing materials from the original Design Traditions project, and this one we are calling 1.5, trying to emphasize the fact that we are building on that. This is not starting from scratch, it's a continuity of policy, but adding information and detail where it's needed. We are in the process now of gaining an understanding of the existing city codes and policies that influence design character, as well as the guidelines themselves. And of course, recent state regulations that were not on the books 20 years ago that are important in terms of how they influence how the city can manage its character. And there are a lot of other background materials as well. Now let's see if I've got it going in the right direction. One of the things we have still in our files are all of the digital photographs from 1999 and 2000 when we were doing that project. And many of them in color, and in some cases we may be refreshing the guidelines, which are in black and white, with color images from there. We'll also be adding, of course, a lot of new imagery. But we also have a lot of analysis of background information and data from that time that we are going to be able to build on. There was a great description of neighborhood character in different neighborhoods that we have that is not in the current guidelines, but could be very useful, and we plan on bringing that forward and asking the community to help us update that information to be certain that it's still correct. We've mapped out a series of steps along the way to execute the project, and we're in steps 1 and 2 at the moment of getting an understanding of existing conditions and the regulations, that are on the books at the moment. We are in process of planning for the first community workshop. There are 3 that are planned throughout the series of the project, as well as hearings that would occur before the Planning Commission and before you. What's important to point out here is step 5, and that is before we actually start drafting what would then be proposed for adoption, we're going to come back to you to check in to see that we are set in the right direction. We will have outlined the changes that we propose. There will be enough detail for you to understand where we propose to go, but we want to have that go signal from you before we move on. After that, there will be drafts of the revised documents. They will be made public. There will be other workshops where the public can then comment on them, and then there will be the adoption hearing processes. So there'll be a lot of opportunities for people to participate, which are summarized here. The dates here are tentative. If we are able to stay on schedule, this is roughly what we're thinking, that in early to mid-June would be the first workshop. We'll be probably confirming that date within the next few days here. We have one tentatively scheduled. And then August and November would be other major community workshops, with adoption hearings being early next year. So that's an overview of the project as we've structured it at the moment, understanding that there will be adjustments made as we gain information from the community. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Brandon, and we'll be listening to your initial guidance at this point. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Good to have you back.
It's a pleasure.
Right, thanks, Nori. And we are really excited, especially for these upcoming community workshops. We have lots of great pictures of what those look like in the past. They're very hands-on, the community sitting around tables, doing tabletop exercises. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun and really interesting. So what we're looking for today is really like I said, two simple questions. What are the key issues that this council sees, or recent trends that the project needs to address? Big level, big issues, big trends. And then what will make this project a success when we look back in the future? And we'll take that direction however you want to give it to us. We're really, as Nori said, we're in the early stages of assessing the existing conditions, doing these orientations. So if you don't have a lot, that's okay. We'll take whatever you're willing to give us, and then I'll leave it to the council how they would like to get the public's input on these questions as well. And Nori and I will sit here and take notes, and if you have questions for us, we're happy to answer them.
Thank you, Brandon. I guess I'd be happy to kick it off a little bit. And what are the key issues, recent trends that the project should address? I'd hope that we realize that there's such a good thing as bad architecture, and there's such a thing as good architecture. Not one style specifically, just the fact that, there's certain constraints out there that may be limiting creativity, such as volumetrics, FAR, those kind of things. So I'd hope we can use those issues to go ahead and make sure that we don't stifle creativity, but we go ahead and allow for the right kind of development that looks appropriate. It's not tacky or unsightly. Now, what makes the project a success when we look back in here? I'd hope we've created a dialogue that we can have with the community that we can then take and extend further into general plan updates, going ahead and taking a look at what the future of this community is going to look like. And we hope we'll have a conduit to making those kind of discussions a success. That'd be my hope. Anybody else?
I'll go. I guess something that I've noticed lately in the town is maybe a little bit more hardscape than I would like to see in the front of houses. I would like to see a little bit more softer hardscape between the road and the house itself, so that I don't know how extensive our landscape plans are when people build homes, but if that could be looked at and addressed, I think that would be something that we should look at.
Anybody else? Jeff?
Thank you. I'm of course never shy. My biggest issue, what I see around town are houses that are not subordinate to the forest, or not subordinate to the environment in which they exist. Nori, you mentioned a couple of minutes ago about your language about different neighborhoods around town, and I think that that's pretty important. There are houses on Scenic that are perfect for Scenic and would be terrible anywhere else. And to me, those houses are sort of perfect architecture. They sit where they sit, where they sit. It's fantastic. There are some houses on Scenic that don't really fit anywhere. And I've seen, we've seen sort of these sort of oddball houses come up, and why they come up is, there are sort of lots of reasons how these things come to exist. But they call attention to themselves rather than calling attention to the environment that's in Carmel. I spent 10 minutes earlier in this meeting talking about community, and houses that don't fit into the forest or don't fit onto Scenic Drive don't fit into the community of houses that we have here. And I think that that's really important, and I think that that's something that we have lost. I think a couple of things lead to that. One, when you tune into the Planning Commission hearings, you hear a lot of sort of back and forth between the homeowners and the neighbors. But what you don't hear is a back and forth between the homeowner or the builder and someone that represents the Carmel community. So a lot of times we see houses that become easier for the neighbor to take, but they can become more difficult for people that are walking down the street to take. And whether it's odd shapes in the houses to preserve someone's views, or this seems to manifest itself in a number of different ways, and I'm afraid that ADUs, in fact, are only going to make that worse. And finally, a little tiny nit, which I've spoken to both Chip and Brandon about. We tend to approve a lot of things. Staff tends to approve a lot of things over the counter after designs are done, and I wish we tightened up on that. So I wish, I have a house on my street, for example, that had three over-the-counter permits granted. And while each of those permits was insignificant, the total of those 3 permits resulted in a house that was very different from the house that was approved. And so at some point, that house should have gone back for review to make sure that it still fit within the guidelines. What I would say, the final question you asked was for how do we evaluate that the project is a success? And my big picture idea for how we evaluate whether our projects are a success is by having a disinterested third party come in after the houses are completed and look at them. I know, Brandon, that there's already some process inside planning where you do actually go through and look at the reviewed houses. These are the houses that the Planning Commission reviewed last year or 2 years ago or whatever. I think it would be a worthwhile exercise to evaluate the houses, have someone come in from the outside and say, does this house that was built, does this final product of this house fit into the community in which it was built? Have a neutral arbiter make that decision and provide feedback so we can figure out in turn how we adjust the approval process that we have so that the houses actually add to the community. Thank you so much again. I'm sure I speak for all of us, but I especially speak for myself. Really excited to have this project going.
Well said, Jeff. Carrie?
Thank you. Nori, I've got a question for you. Is part of this design review going to be looking at the whole issue of sustainability in building products and updating the code so that we can utilize more updated products that help with heat in the house and ventilation and things like that, or is it purely just design?
Can I answer that yes and no?
Okay. Yes, you can.
Yes, and that the guidelines have to anticipate the need for sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't necessarily the place where specifics about performance of materials or actual energy consumption of a building is documented. But in terms of addressing materials, building scale and form and orientation, and how accessory equipment is located and designed, yes, we do need to address those with an understanding that the objective is to find the best way to accommodate those things in a way that is still compatible with village character.
Excellent. For me, the success of this project is going to be the community is going to accept it. And so I really appreciate the workshops that are going to be going on. And so this is going to allow the community to come together about the design review. I think we're at a point now that I feel the community is kind of butting heads a little bit. So hopefully this process is going to allow people to come together and really feel that they're having an input and the community is listening. So that, to me, is going to be the definition of success.
Thank you, Carrie. And from Dubrovnik, Croatia, Councilmember Ferlito, do you have comments?
Yes, I do. First of all, I think all of the previous comments have been right on. I am particularly interested in siting of new homes and projects because I think the siting is so important. And all my years of volunteerism as a Forest and Beach Commissioner, we used to see every project. And somehow over the last many years, I don't think the Forest and Beach Commission sees as many. So a lot of the landscaping and the tree protection is left to staff, which is helpful to making the process go a little faster. But I think the emphasis on preserving our forest, but not just preserving, but ensuring that we have a future forest is sometimes left to the end rather than being part and parcel of the whole thing. And with basements that have been allowed over the last many years, there's a lot less room for trees and tree roots. And while sometimes builders try to miss the trunk of trees, they forget that there are root systems that need to be cared for as well. So siting is very important. I also think, there's a balance. There's a balance between, good design and also continuing our the houses that we've been used to for many, many years. Carmel has eclectic homes throughout the community. It isn't just recently that houses have, someone needs to mute. I'm sorry, there's a lot of feedback. Anyway, siting is so important, how it fits into the neighborhood. Don't fall in love with just the design of the house. It has to be subordinate to the forest, as Councilman Barron said, and just, a really good feeling as you drive down the street that one or two houses aren't just screaming out as attention getters, but fitting in. And success, I think, is going to come with the greatest amount of involvement with the community, because this is going to be what our community goes forward with and looks like in the future. So we want to encourage everyone to be involved in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for participating at this late hour over there. Much appreciated. So this is not a public appearance item. This is simply an informational item, so there'll be plenty of time for public input on this item. I'd encourage everybody to get involved as has been asked and requested. I think it's most appropriate. That noted, we'll move on then to public appearances. It's an opportunity for any member of the public to speak on an item that is not on tonight's calendar. If there's anybody wishing to speak on an item, now would be the time, so please come forward. There's a 3-minute limitation on the testimony. And if you'd state your name for the record, I'd appreciate it.
It's Victoria Beach. I just wanted to say a couple words on public participation, and those words are thank you. I am very encouraged by the openness of the City Hall, of the friendly staff when all my dealings, especially Planning Department, I'm looking at you. The solicitous counsel that is always looking for our thoughts, and even the structure of the official procedures that have so many opportunities for us to weigh in. I also, as a side, want to say this is commensurate with the meetings that Jeff ran for these Vibrancy, a very good example of that kind of openness and sort of free expression of local citizens' ideas. I think that sometimes this can be personally frustrating to individuals. There's so much information coming in. We might feel that we're at our full capacity, especially with a pandemic. And it's often too much for one person or one body even to sort through all this information. I mean, I even get midnight calls from people, engaged citizens who are curious about the various topics, like the one that Jeff very, I think, accurately reviewed with you. The design guideline thing that's before us, this 8th Avenue thing that's coming up later. Even this morning, I learned new information about that particular project, even though I'm probably the person who's been following it since day one more than anyone. So this village is blessed with a true army of researchers. They're devoted to understanding and promoting the public interest. And I want to thank you all for your genuine interest in their findings as we proceed with various projects here. And of course, there's also sometimes zealous advocacy on behalf of private interests. And this passion and hard work on both sides can only raise our standards of knowledge and improve our decision making. So again, I want to thank you for dutifully suppressing any frustrations you might have and continuing to listen and learn from everybody as you have so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Is there anybody else in the room wishing to speak tonight?
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I know I'm not a member of the public, but just if I could briefly, I just want to let anybody know who is watching on Zoom or in the audience tonight, if they have comments or thoughts on the 2 questions that we asked council tonight on the design tradition sort of kickoff, those 2 early questions, they can email, call me, call my department. We'll add them to the pile so that at least people can have an opportunity to weigh in on those 2 questions. Since we didn't agendize it as a public comment item, we do want to hear from people, though, if they're interested. So feel free to email my office, call me. All of our contact information is on the website.
Thank you, Brandon. Is there anybody else in the room wishing to speak? See no one. Is there anybody in the Zoom world wishing to speak tonight?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Cruz.
I'm a little confused. Did we just hear that this is not the time for public comment on Nori Winter's participation here in Carmel?
Yes, that's what you heard. And also Brandon Swanson said if you did have comments now, go ahead and submit them in writing. This was not agenda as a public hearing item.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Is there anybody else with a question or a comment?
I have a comment. It's Joe Todd. Am I up next?
Yes, Joe, you have the time.
All right. Joe Todd, resident. I just wanted to say that I'm very saddened that the Fifth and the new building that's being considered now for the hole there at 5th and Lincoln, I think is at 5th and Lincoln, is not considering having affordable housing. And I'm not considering, and I'm fine, there's some feedback going on someplace. Okay. I'm very happy with my resident, but I'm thinking of, future people not being able to find affordable housing. But I see that it was addressed earlier this afternoon, and I wasn't at that meeting where they did discuss about the housing. And the second thing I wanted to ask about is the thank you very much. I noticed the signs that are on the street signs are visible now. So that's great. Thank you for that. And the other thing is that the post office lobby, that has not been addressed in a while. And I know that we got that all straightened out with the packages, but I'm wondering, there was just supposed to be temporary, and it seems to nothing is being done about that, the lobby closing. And I was just wondering if the post office people could consider perhaps having the lobby open at least a Saturday at 8 p.m. because right now it's a ridiculous 4:30. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Mr. Spielvogel, you've decided you're not going to Zoom in, you're going to be in person.
I'm sorry?
This is an item that's not on tonight's agenda?
It's not about tonight's agenda.
Okay, all right.
Anyways, I'd like to apologize for restaurateurs for anything that offended any of council or mayor or city manager. I'd like to also apologize for any restaurants that was considered taking advantage of the situation. I apologize for them. I also would like to acknowledge Bo for all that he went through for 2 years, being taking a lot of crap from a lot of people. He did a great job, and he was terrific because he was concentrated on a cure. So if there was a problem, He gave it a very short period of time to cure the situation, and he was very, very effective. And there were some restaurateurs that were not very nice to him, and I apologize, I won't mention any names. I would like to mention that I don't think that politics should be a punishment, but should be an opportunity for compromise. And I think that the community, when they speak, they should have the opportunity to be voted on. The effects of several hundred seats that are gone, there might have been the hope that it would go and it'd be the distribution of that wealth, or people to go to different, has not been that effect. People that have very large patios have gotten the effect of it, doing a lot more business, which they were doing even more during COVID, so that effect did not happen. Our poor dogs have less places to sit at. And sorry about that. I would like to, I have a couple of requests that if it's possible, when there is a restaurant, a food service thing on the agenda, if it could be early, because most of us do work at night, and if we have to spend 2 or 3 hours here, which in our cases, if it's possible to have it early, if not, I made the request. And let's see what else. I have 40 seconds to talk about one thing that we've asked for a long time, is that, you know, the amount of seating. I would like to address the potential moratorium on seating, especially on outdoor seating. Some of the previous restaurants in the last several years have huge approval for outdoor seating, and they should not have. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. For the record, that was Ken Spielfogel.
Yes.
Is there anybody else wishing to speak, Zoom or in person? All right, hearing nobody, I'll close the public comment period and move on then to announcements. City Administrator Chip.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first thing I wanted to, again, thank the staff for putting on the boarding commission member and the staff appreciation luncheon last week. It was a wonderful event. I wanted to, again, thank our staff and our volunteers. Thank the council members for attending. I did my best, council members Richards and Ferlito, to read your comments. Thank you for those. They were appreciated. It was a very nice event, and again, it's just one small thing we can do to recognize and honor our staff and worthy volunteers and boards and commission members. Well, the second item is, if you do have letters that you're sending, even if they're coming in after the packet's been produced or before, please be sure to copy the city clerk to ensure that they're distributed to the council members. All the letters that we do get obviously go to the council members directly, but we do include them as part of the packet as I think they're called correspondence received. So that's number 2. And then number 3, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to welcome the Chamber Interim CEO, Jody Hansen. Thank you for joining us, and El Presidente, Sigale, to her right. Thank you for joining us. Welcome, and we're here to help and facilitate if you need anything, of course. So that's what I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chip. Moving on, City Attorney Brian.
We have no reportable action from the closed sessions we had yesterday afternoon.
Thank you. And looking to my left, council member comments. Bobby?
Yeah, I don't know if some of you knew that we had some of the kids from Carmel High come up here last week and do a kind of a mock council meeting. So I want to make a huge thank you to Graham Robertson and Mayor White, who were instrumental in doing that. Also, thank you, Ashley and Leslie, for helping. And then a few of the kids did write something, and I just want to read that for them, as I promised I would. This one came from Lily, who was the chief, was her mentor. Hi, Bobby. I think it was an amazing experience for all of us, and I'm so grateful that everyone from council and city made it possible. Thanks. Another one was from my student, who unfortunately was in a big golf tournament that day where I think he did end up taking second place in the league, but he wasn't here for most of it. Hi, Mr. Richards. Filling the positions of Carmel-by-the-Sea city officials with students is a fun and friendly way to educate young people in policymaking process firsthand. Thank you. And then one last one.
That's great.
Thank you to the City Hall for setting up this opportunity, which was both fun and provided insight into the city government. In particular, I'm grateful to Ms. Carrie Tice for volunteering her time to instruct and prepare me. I had a great time learning from her, as well as Mr. Bobby Richards, who managed to teach me about city council and what an unprotected left turn is at the same time. I think this was a great idea and hope we can continue student interest and involvement in our local government. Thank you. So great job, Mayor White. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody that helped, all the public, Brandon, everybody. Thank you.
Well said. Carrie? Karen, anything from Dubrovnik?
Yes, actually, I was about to say that our mayor, Mayor Potter, is pretty famous in Dubrovnik. He's been there many, many times. And I was able to visit the city hall the other day, and Igor said to tell you hello, that he hopes you'll return there one day. But I did want to say that the sister city program that Monterey participates in with Dubrovnik is really a pretty special thing. And I'm not really clear if Carmel has any sister cities, but it might be something that we want to pursue in the future. As far as any official announcement, the AMBAG RENA number allocations are out for public comment now. And if you're curious about that process, you can go to the AMBAG website and find out all about the regional housing needs assessment. And I hope you will do that, because it will be interesting and it will be something that we will be challenged to be able to provide. So I do hope you'll become involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And would you please let Igor know that we miss him? He would love to see him again. Ginny and I miss him much, but he was very trusting. He actually sent his teenage daughters over for Ginny and I to oversee for a week or so. Very dangerous proposition, but he's a great family guy, really good guy.
Yes.
All righty, well, I'll go ahead and, Jeff, you mentioned earlier that you thought Carrie was a classic example of somebody that works well and is a businesswoman and represents a very well-founded organization, that being the Hospice House, and it's their 75th anniversary. I thought I'd recognize it was a proclamation, if I might. So whereas Hospice House has been family-run for 75 years, co-founded by Donna Hospice in 1947, later run by her son Jack, followed by his daughter Doris and her son Scott, and now run by Doris's daughter Carrie, who has been the general manager since 2000. And whereas the hotel and family have been and continue to be involved and invested in the local community, hosting fundraising events for organizations such as Peace of Mind Dog Rescue, Carmel Public Library Foundation, the Monterey County Food Bank, and whereas from its beginning, Hospice House is a unique destination with many personal and artistic touches to each room in the hotel and grounds, including a mural by artist Maxine Albro. And whereas Hospice House is now home to an artist in residence program that began in 2020 with the commissioning of folk artist Marie Claire Tressiter Gorham to touch up the Maxine Albro mural, and continues in 2022 with songwriter and poet Rags Rosenberg. And whereas Hospice House embodies the unique charm of Carmel-by-the-Sea and has been a host to travelers of all kinds from all over the world, now therefore it be proclaimed that I, Dave Potter, Mayor of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea, on behalf of the City Council and the citizens of Carmel, hereby congratulate Hospice on its 75th anniversary for providing rest and respite to travelers from the sea to the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea. Carrie, congratulations. Well done.
Wow. Thank you. I'm very touched. Thank you. Wow, I'm very surprised as well. But for all of those that would like to come and help celebrate, next Thursday from 5 to 7 on May 12th, we're having a celebration in our parking lot. So we invite the city of Carmel and its residents and business people to come celebrate not only a longtime business, but also a representation of family. So we will have a poetry reading and some good food and libation, so please join us. And thank you very much for thinking of me. That's very nice.
Well, I will have to give credit to the former mayor, Steve Dallas, who also said, Dave, this would be a good idea. So I don't want to act like I stole the idea, but it was a great suggestion. So thank you for all you've done, Gary. You've been a great colleague. I will miss you on this council, honestly. I've said that before, but I'm sorry you're departing. But I don't think anybody realizes quite how much effort it takes to be on council, what an impact it has on any business. You've done this for 2 terms, 8 years of dedication to the city. That's a pretty good commitment, so thank you. Mean it very sincerely. All right, why don't we get on to orders of business? I'm sorry. Oh, Jeff, I'm sorry about that. My gosh.
Yeah, I always have my announcement.
Oh.
We'll have a climate change. We are going to have a climate change meeting, number 30 or something like that. I've lost count at this point. On May the 19th, where we'll be reviewing some feedback that we've gotten from our climate action and adaptation plans. And on that note, Councilmember Tice and I will be having a little community meeting and workshop on our draft plans. It's tentatively scheduled for May the 24th. We're going to do it at 4 p.m. at Hofsa's house. So I see Agnes and Bob looking at each other over there. No, we don't need Agnes and Bob. I'm hoping that the two of us can sort of wiggle our way through it at the same time, although we do need you to do our presentations for us. So we'll be doing that May the 24th at 4 p.m. For anybody in the community. I know I have reached out to the CRA, and we're hoping to get some publicity from them as well. The conference room holds about 40 or 50 people, so we're hoping to fill it up. And finally, sort of an unrelated announcement this month. As many of you know or don't know, the assembly districts have changed this year. So rather than Monterey County being generally with Santa Cruz County this year, we are generally with San Luis Obispo County this year. It's a big sea change for what's going on for our representation in Sacramento. And the League of Women Voters is having an online candidates forum tomorrow at 7 o'clock. I'm pretty sure this announcement is for everybody in this room, whether or not you're a member of whether or not you're a constituent of Carmel. You can find information on this online forum at the League of Women Voters website. It's my for Monterey.lwv.org. So they require advanced registration, and I would encourage everybody to go to that website, register, and then tune in at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Do your civic duty. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. All right, why don't we move on then to orders of businesses. Consider applications submitted as part of fiscal year 2022-2023 Council Discretionary Grant Program. Provide funding recommendations to staff. Chip, before I go to Ashley, did you want to have anything to say?
Not on this one, Mr. Mayor. No, thank you.
Okay.
Actually, I do, Mr. Mayor. We do have, you saw her picture from Community Human Services. Mrs. McCrae has amended their application, and the Carmel Residents Association have also amended their application, and I'm sure Ms. Wright will reference those when she does her presentation. So thank you.
Excellent. Ashley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. Good evening, Council. Thank you for letting me be here this evening to talk about our Council Discretionary Grant Program. So this year we received 11 applications. Those applications were included in your packet. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my screen share. And get this started. These applications were reviewed against policy C-1701, and that is the City Council's Discretionary Funds Grant Program that was adopted in 2017. The eligibility criteria stipulate that the applicant be located in 93921 or serving the 93921, a nonprofit-based 501c, or a Carmel school, that they directly provide community service for which the funds are sought. They have no outstanding debt to the city, and they're not financially dependent on city support. I did include as attachment number 2 to your agenda packet a summary of the applications themselves, including the name of the organization, the amount requested, their purpose, so what they're asking for funds to be used for, and whether or not they met the eligibility requirements. We received applications from the Carmel Heritage Society, the Carmel Padre Parents Sober Grad Night, Carmel Residents Association, the Youth Center, Community Human Services, Food Bank for Monterey County, the Monterey Peninsula Ballet Theater, and the PAC Rep Theater as well. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, we had a total of 11 applications. The 3 applications that are not included here are one received from Lou Ganavan because it was an incomplete application without any of the supplemental materials. The United Way of Monterey County, which has been included in the operating budget, and the Monterey County Film Commission. For the past 2 years, the council has talked about including the Monterey County Film Commission as part of the marketing and economic development budget. Community Activities Department works closely with the Monterey County Film Commission on ensuring that they have up-to-date information about film shoots here in Carmel and around, and those impacts to us and fees. We work closely with them on that, and I'm sure some of you probably saw All the Old Knives out on Amazon, which the beginning of that film is cruising Carmel Street. So it is a effective relationship that we have with them. As Chip mentioned, there were amendments to certain applications that were submitted. That was the Carmel Residents Association that was originally looking for funding to support the programs that they hold in Carpenter Hall to pay the fees associated with that. They submitted an email today amending that request to have those funds, should they be awarded, apply to the production of special community informational mailers to inform and educate citizens on critical civic topics. So that will be up for the council to think about and ponder whether or not they want to accept that amendment to their original submission. And the Community Human Services clarified that their request for funds would be used for a one-time purchase for bedding and bath towels for their shelter, which need to be replaced. So those 2 amendments are included there. These recommendations that you see here are based on staff's interpretation of the policy as it stands now. The council can decide to go in any direction with that and with your own interpretation of the applications and the policy. The recommendation here is just to provide staff with direction with regards to which of these applications should be funded or not funded. I'm here to answer any questions, and I do want to make a note about the Carmel Residents Association application in particular, because it has come up during public comments at some of our council meetings lately to the point where I've noticed it and had several conversations with some of the Sunset Center staff about scheduling and meeting management and things like that. And that is the cost in particular of renting Carpenter Hall. I think that's something that has come up enough times that council may want to think about that. I'm not sure what that would entail in terms of the contract that is in place between the city and Sunset Center, but I don't think it should get tangled up in this grant process. And I also want to be cognizant of the Sunset Center staff time and labor that goes into setting up the meeting room, especially for later in the evening hours when you're using technology. Somebody has to be there to make sure that these things work and that everything is set up to the organizer's satisfaction. So I just wanted to make note of that, and I did have a conversation with the Carmel Residents Association about that. But again, here to answer any questions as you proceed with your discussions.
Thank you, Ashley. Before I open up for a cup of comment, are there any questions of Ashley by staff or council members, excuse me, by council members at this time? Karen, nothing? Yes or no? All right, I'll open it up for public comment. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to comment on this item. 3-minute limitation on the testimony. If you'd state your name for the record, I'd appreciate it. Is there anybody in the room wishing to speak tonight? I don't see anybody coming forward. Don't be shy. All right, is there anybody in Zoom land wishing to speak? So Robin, looks like you might have your hand up.
Just briefly, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to provide an amendment and a clarification. That was completely my error. For us, the blankets and linens would have been program supply, which would be general operating, and I should not have phrased it that way since it's intended for a one-time purchase. So thank you for the opportunity to amend our application.
Appreciate the mea culpa, well said. Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Last chance. All right, I'll bring it back to council for direction. Council members, your druthers. Bobby?
Yeah, so we have two right now. There were, out of all of them that submitted applications, 3 of them were hit with a no, and 2 of them have sent amendments. And what about the third one, Ashley? They have not sent an amendment?
So out of the 11 that were submitted, 1 is just out. They did not submit any supplemental requests, and that was one that was not included in your packet. United Way was included as part of the operating budget, as was Monterey County Film Commission. That leaves 2 of those 8, and that is, or 3 of the 8, which is the Carmel Residents Association, Community Human Services, and the Monterey Peninsula Ballet Group, who by the policy would not qualify for grant funds. However, the Carmel Residents Association and Community Human Services submitted clarifying or alternate uses, potential uses for the funds that aren't in conflict with the policy. So the two to consider whether or not to include and turn green are the Carmel Residents Association and Community Human Services.
So for me personally, I'd like to include them in this, but I'd also like the opportunity for the ballet to send in an amendment. Is that possible?
I look to staff, I can't imagine it's not possible, but.
Right, so this is atypical. This has never happened since we launched the policy in 2017 that we've had last minute amendments submitted. This has been an ongoing process, and most of these groups have submitted applications for the last 5 years. So whether or not council wants to allow amendments is another topic for discussion. So if you like the amendments and want to move forward with that is, you can provide us with that direction to do it. But our grant application period ended back in April. So, and again, nothing in the policy has changed in the last 5 years. So I'll leave it with all of you for discussion.
I mean, I would be.
Jeff,
go ahead,
Jeff. I'm sorry, Jeff.
I have a question, Ashley. What prompts, and maybe this is, what prompts the United Way to have it, and a film group to have their own line items in the budget, whereas these 11 items don't have line items in the budget? Is there a sort of a status distinction between important and not important? I don't think that's the reason.
That is not the reason. Those 2 have been pulled out of this process by council direction. So this is based on deliberations held by council, and I do not remember the reasoning for United Way, but I do, in particular, because I work closely with the Monterey County Film Commission as part of the Community Activities Department, have it, and I actually did go back and double check that my memory was correct and looked at the minutes, but it was discussed as part of budget deliberations last year for the Monterey County Film Commission to be considered as part of marketing, because that's what that organization supports when we do film shoots here in town. They are the ones who are reaching out to the film and production companies. They're letting them know what our regulations are, what rules they'll have to follow before they come in town. So it's their functions a little different. United Way, again, that was a council direction to staff to include that in the budget ongoing. Now, council could scrap the council discretionary policy at some point if they want to and just include all of these and not have a policy regarding these. Prior to 2017, I think we had kind of a loose one or no policy at all, and community groups would just send in letters and the council would decide that way. So this was staff trying to apply more of a process that governs the distribution of the public funds to community groups.
Chip, I sense you're trying to say something.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. I can reinforce. So United Way, their 211 program benefits the entire village, and so it's been council's direction, as Ashley has said, that we support that as part of the operating budget. It's not specific to a dance company or an association of some kind. It really is more broad-based, helping everyone in the village in their time of need, regardless of whether you're a member or not. And then she's exactly correct on the Film Commission. We've interpreted the Film Commission as being a marketing, part of our marketing tool to celebrate the village, celebrate our natural resources and our assets, vis-a-vis the opportunity to have films, whether it's still or motion picture shot in the village. So that's the history of those two line items, Mr. Barron.
All right, Karen, did you want to say something?
Yes, I did. Ashley, would you clarify that you said the amended applications from the two groups would meet the discretionary guidelines?
Yes, those would meet the discretionary guidelines. One-time program use, yes.
Okay, since that is, I would like to see those groups included. I think, sometimes these forms that people fill out for grants are confusing or, they're just not sure how to answer some of the things. So perhaps that's what happened here. So I would support the inclusion of those two groups.
All right, with that, any other Carrie?
So, Karen, just to clarify, are you speaking of the CRA and what other group?
The Community Human Services.
Thank you.
Okay, so to Bobby, your question then regarding the Mount Peninsula Ballet Theater, they were the ones left out, right?
That's the only one left out if we don't include it. For me, I would make the motion that we would approve all of these that are currently in front of us and allow some avenue for the ballet to make this amendment, which would increase the funds though. And so I don't know how that would work. If they did amend their application to be included, then that would offset. I mean, we would go over the budget.
Well, that's okay, Mr. Richards. We can find the $9,000 in the budget if that's your motion. My suggestion is you would condition the motion on the ballet theater finding a funding source that complies with our policy.
Okay, so Mayor, shall I make a motion? Can I make a motion?
Go ahead, make a motion.
So I'd make the motion that we approve these, including the amended, and also allow the 11th, or the 11th one, the ballet, to be approved if they can fall within the guidelines.
All right, we have a second.
I second.
Okay, Karen seconded for discussion. Is there any other discussion? Carrie?
Okay, I'm trying to get clarity here. The chart is eight applicants. I understand. So I'm trying to figure out where's the other three that were.
They were the three, ma'am. They were the three. The one that was an incomplete application, the one that was the marketing funds for the Film Commission, and the third being United Way. That was all 11 applications.
But those are already in.
Yes, ma'am.
So we don't need
Correct.
to.
I can clarify that, Karen.
Okay, help me out here.
So it'll be 5. So I would approve the 5 that are currently on the yes list. 2 that currently have the amended applications in, and 1 with the ability, the ballet with the ability to put an amended application in that would fall within our guidelines. That would be my motion.
Okay, are we clear? Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes, Karen?
Yes, and as the second, I accept that.
All right.
Thank you.
So if there's no other questions, I'll call a roll. Yashin? A motion and a second.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Councilmember Tice?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes?
And Mayor Potter?
Aye.
The vote is unanimous.
Thank you. All right, why don't we move on to item number 2, which is receive fiscal year 2022-2023 recommended budget. This is receive the budget only. Simply been announcing the document is ready for public review. We do have a upcoming workshop, I think, on the 17th.
Yes, sir.
Where we will provide direction to staff. So you want to go ahead and then I'll go to Robin?
Yeah, let me, if I can, while Robin's setting up, make a couple of introductory comments. This is, you hit the nail on the head, Mr. Mayor. This is the introduction to the budget, no decisions tonight. I wanted to extend my thanks to Robin and Russell and Anna and Yvette and Ashley and Leslie and Max and Brandon and all the department heads that made this budget possible. This is a very unprecedented budget. In our 106-year history, never has a budget eclipsed $30 million. I can remember on one of my previous offenses in the village when we eclipsed $10 million, and that was monumental for 1 square mile and 3,800 people. So it's pretty darn incredible. The fact that we have a budget of this scale is a direct result of the posture we assumed at the beginning of the pandemic 2 years ago. So it was because of the council's posture, the staff's willingness to pitch in to do a little bit more with less, that we got through this. That said, we have produced a budget that makes a modest use of one-time fund balance for capital work. And this is not a model that's sustainable. We'll get into this a little bit more again on the 17th, without a new revenue source in the long term. This budget is informed by several economic indicators. And here's a list of them as examples. Federal Reserve rate increase is the first since 2018. The Fed is meeting again today and tomorrow. We're expecting about a 0.5% rate increase, 0.5% increase. And that's an attempt to ease inflation and cool the economy. Obviously, we've all been faced with accelerating inflation. The Consumer Price Index, which is a measure of inflation, has been rising. Obviously, there are geopolitical tensions all over the world. Crude oil hitting a 14-year high at $130 a barrel. United Airlines, Marriott, Hilton, Wyndham, and these are travel and leisure-based companies, all trading at all-time highs on the stock market. American Express's first quarter earnings report, and that's specific to travel entertainment, is up 121% over 1 year, and that's to pre-pandemic levels at this point in time. And as a reminder, consumer spending accounts for about 70% of our economic growth in the United States. It's 2/3 of our pillars, our revenue pillars here in the village. So what we believe has been happening here in the village is best described by our own Brandon Swanson, who coined the phrase revenge spending, in our case, revenge travel. The largest that we are enjoying right now is a direct result of our visitor trade and traffic for those who have come to the village seeking relief from the pandemic. And I'll go on to say that no report from me would be incomplete for City Council Member Ferlita without a sports analogy. And it's a fallacy called the hot hand fallacy. The fallacy being whatever's happening now will continue to happen. And for example, in basketball, if a basketball player is making a lot of shots, there's a tendency to give that person the ball with the thought that they're going to continue to make baskets. That's a fallacy. Every time you shoot or roll a dice, you have the same odds. The same, you can apply the same kind of analogy to economics. And just because consumer leisure spending is so hot right now, we can't expect it to continue indefinitely. So we've built a budget that conservatively recognizes growth in revenue, but anticipates the leisure market contracting as the nation moves into a recessionary posture. So today, again, you'll receive a budget that Robin and Russell and others have prepared. Robin is a resident of our community. This is her last budget presentation. She'll be retiring in about 55 days or so. So thank you, Robin, for all the work that you've done to the village, for the village. And please feel free to correct all the things I've gotten wrong.
I'll just say, no doing math in public, Chip, okay? Okay, so it's great. Thank you, Chip. I appreciate the introduction. And again, thank you, council members, for your time, especially across the world. And as Chip said, there are many thanks to this. Before I get into the high-level summary, exactly, administration, we take a lot of guidance from them, and but the departments help really heavily in preparing the budget. So, with administration and finance, we really work heavily on the personnel costs, salary and benefits, But we pull in departments. They put in their time analyzing, looking at their departments for the services and supplies. So it's department heads. They pull in a lot of staff from their departments. So they work with the numbers of those to really make sure that their department needs are going to be met in the year ahead. And they also spend time, they write their own narratives for their departments. Of course, administrative and finance, we write a lot of the beginning stuff in the book, but then the departments do take the time to write. I also want to thank Ashley Wright. So as we've all done writing and narratives and charts, Ashley wonderfully took the time, volunteered to, as we call, stitch together into a book. So with all that Ashley has to do, she volunteered and she took the time. So thank you very much to Ashley for our actual budget document. And I strongly encourage, I know council, you all take the time to read the book, but our public, especially those that are tuning in for the first time, paying attention to the budget process, thank you. But our budget book is a really valuable document. We try to make it thorough, but at the same time understandable and user-friendly. So I really encourage everybody to read it from front to back. A lot of explanations and answers are in there. So like I said, we most certainly welcome submittal of questions and comments, but a lot of times it can be found beforehand by reading through the book. Again, I know obviously your council is very well of our process, but again, especially for our public, to let them know about the budget process, that today we're just giving an overview presentation. We're not having any sort of decisions regarding our budget, excluding, like I said, you gave direction on this discretionary grant program, so thank you. We'll be looking for a direction on the CIP projects as Bob comes up after me. But otherwise, everything else is just a presentation today. So again, give an assurance to the public that the council will not be making any decisions. There's still a lot of time and a lot of input that goes into it. We have an open budget question period. So May 3rd through May 20th, but we did receive questions from your council, has submitted some questions to Chip beforehand. We also received some questions from the public. We are preparing what we call our Q&A document, and we put every question on there. We thoroughly write an answer, and we'll be presenting that. Where we will really have a deep dive on the budget is on May 17th. We have a budget workshop. So again, we fully encourage the public to participate in that. And at that workshop, we'll really dig in deep to all the details of what is in our revenue, what is in our expenditures, our staffing levels. We'll also provide the Q&A document, responses to the questions that we received of May 12th. And then we'll come back on June 7th, and that's where we'll have the budget adoption meeting. And at that, we'll provide an updated recommended budget book that will include the direction that your council has provided today, like I said, with the CIPs and with the discretionary grants. And then also direction that we receive on May 17th for any additions, removals, or adjustments to the budget. And that will give a full Q&A document then, so any questions that come in after May 12th. So that's going to be the process. So our budget highlights, Chip wonderfully hit on that, but again, just a quick synopsis there is that we have a balanced budget. We're going to be using $32.3 million of projected new revenue, and then $2.1 million of prior year savings, AKA fund balance. It's a term we're all familiar with. And the fund balance is really to specifically hit hard all of the deferred capital projects that have sat with the city. We're also budgeting to have full staffing levels to helpfully support the operations of the city and council priorities, as we've had the various council workshops, and you've let us know the priorities that you would like attended to. So the full staffing to help meet those priorities. Contract services to support the staff in the operations and the priorities. Again, as we've discussed at the workshops, that a lot of times we really need specialized help to make some of these priorities come to reality. We continue to fund for our pension mitigation, our Section 115 trust. We put $1 million in fiscal year, this current fiscal year, and we're looking to put in another $1 million, which is really a great use of our funds. And then the capital budget, as of course Bob will be thoroughly discussing with you, but it's covering public safety, hardscape and green infrastructure, technology for operations, some environmentally friendly vehicles, and again, the deferred maintenance on the city's aging facilities. The real high level budget at a glance, showing how we get down to the use of the $2.1 million in fund balance is the recommended expenditures, the various main categories of use in the general fund, capital outlay at $5 million, our pension mitigation at $1 million, our debt service, meeting our debt service requirements, and workers' compensation. And then again, like I said, at May 17th, we will give all the full details of what we have in each of these areas. The revenues, at a glance, again, this is of course just super high level. This is a part of the budget I really recommend everybody reading. Russell gets credit for writing the summary. He really put a lot of wonderful detail in there, but at the same time, making it concise and understandable, because there are a lot of components that go into our budget revenue projections. It isn't really just a straightforward process, and he's really taken the time to give some really great explanations on that. So that's an area I really recommend everybody please read. But it again shows our heavy hitters, of course, our property taxes coming in at 70% of the budget. Sales and Measure C, combining those would be 30% of our projected revenue. And TOT projected at 22% of our revenue. So those are our usual three, heavy hitters for the budget there. And just a small little detail on the three heavy hitters there, and just a little bit of the main thoughts behind these budgets. And again, they're answered very nicely in Russell's write-up. But for property tax, of course, we have that as being very reliable and steady growth for 2023. Where I think we're all, of course, very familiar with the real estate market here, so we're very comfortable with the growth there. Sales and Measure C tax, we do predict a growth there, working very closely with our company HDL Consultants, but even they recommend remaining vigilant and just always watching for changes in the consumer spending patterns. TOT, as Chip mentioned, they were still wanting to be a little guarded there, and still not quite sure of what is, the revenge travel industry and post-pandemic travel patterns. We're experiencing, of course, a really wonderful increase and as a bubble or anomaly for this fiscal year, and we're very happy to have it, but just not quite ready to sit comfortably that growth is going to just continue year after year. So we're going in a bit conservatively for starters on TOT. Expenditures at a glance, again, the usual, the salary and benefits is our largest category at 42% of the budget. Again, our pension is in there at $1 million to the Section 115 trust, and then the UAL payment, that's of course set by CalPERS. We do not have an option on that. They tell us what we have to pay, and we pay it at about $2.1 million there. And then outside services, which again, on May 17th, we'll really go deep into that so everybody knows what's there. But that's where a lot of our contract services rest. So that's why you'll see a larger number there. And then the capital budget coming in at 16% of currently requested expenditures. Then we like to break it out more into the specific functions or departments. and continually have the citywide, or what we call sometimes the departmental budget at 14%. And again, that is where things like our pension payments are there, our insurance payments are there. We'll give more, again, on the 17th, more discussion, but that's why that category is very high there. The police department, again, comes in at 15%, Public Works at 13%, and then our capital budget. So those are our four biggest departments or areas for our expenses. So one real quick slide on capital. Like I said, I'll let Bob get into all the great details of the capital. But just showing that the four highest categories will be public safety at 28%, streets and sidewalks at 20%, facilities at 17%, and the environment at 15%. And so again, like I said, today, just a reminder that, again, it's just this high-level presentation. We welcome all questions from your council, from public, from anybody. I do ask, please, I have the 4 email addresses to use there, and that I know that may seem like a lot, but it's more to help ensure that between Chip, Maxine, myself, and Russell, all the questions get seen, get put on the Q&A, and get addressed, whether we will be answering them ourselves or we will be seeking input from a department. And with that, actually, I will see if the city administrator has any closing comments, and we'll certainly look forward to coming back here on May 17th and have a real full, detailed discussion with your council and the public.
Thank you, Robin. As always, excellent. Chip, did you have any closing comments?
No, sir.
Okay. Was there any questions of Robin at this time? Remember then that they're recognizing this as a receipt of the report only. Is there anybody in the public wishing to comment on this item tonight? Zoom-wise, either in person or here? All right, I don't see anybody. Bring it back to the council. You know, before we go anywhere, I just want to say this is my favorite document. I've said this before, but it's the most easy-to-read description of where public dollars come from and how they're allocated. It's really a pleasure, and I hope it doesn't deteriorate when you leave, Robin, because it has been my pleasure to be able to take this document out. It's quickly find out any allegations of, so how much is public safety, you know, how much is going into public works, how many personnel they have, what's the impact of cuts and what's the impact of gains. I really do think it's an excellent document, so thank you. And I want to thank you personally for all your efforts. Honestly, it's been a pleasure to work with. I'm sorry to see you go.
Thank you. Well, like I said, I'll still remain a residency, so I'll sit on the other side of the table next year and fire all kinds of questions at any point.
Oh dear, oh dear.
I have a,
All right, Jeff.
yeah, thank you. I have one confirmation I'd like to get from you on. So first, thanks to you and Russell for all the work that I know the two of you worked really diligently on this. So thank you for all that. And a special thank you on page 6 of the presentation, where you talk about how you have projected the revenues over the course of the next year, and how you've adapted, sort of using the revenge travel, the guardedness, and all that. So I really appreciate the documentation on those 3 lines. So thank you for that. One thing that I mentioned to Chip, which he asked me to bring today, in the budget book, I think on the second page, on the page it says, now I'm struggling to find it. The page that says City Council. So it's on page, it's on page 24 of the budget book.
Mm-hmm.
There's a section that says City Council, and it says 2022, 2023 priorities. And there are some items listed that I think you and Russell, my guess is that you and Russell put in there. And as I asked Chip, we have a list of priorities that we've discussed over and over again. And so I think it would be good to include our list of priorities, since they're the priorities that the council set, rather than the priorities that you set. Does that make sense? And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes later on this evening. So I think that could be lifted straight out of that document. So we have our 16 priorities, as Chip calls them, or whatever it is. And I think that's better verbiage.
Okay.
For the book.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
And then I just have one quick confirmation. Robin mentioned on page page 3 in the presentation, it says contract services to support staff and operations and council priorities. So the strategic priorities that we've identified are the staffing for those priorities, and to make reasonable progress on those priorities, however we define that, is accounted for in the budget. So in the positions, you know, we can make it through the year and make good progress on those priorities. That's correct. So we don't need to add positions or do anything like that to.
It's correct that, it's correct, the first part of what you said is correct, sir, that we believe we have the resources to accomplish the priorities in this budget, yes.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you.
All righty. I think I went to the public already. No, okay. Is there a motion to receive the report?
I'll make the motion to receive this report.
All right. Who needs a second?
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? Okay, Ashim, could we get the roll call, please? Karen, I'm sorry, did you have anything you wanted to comment on?
Nope.
Okay.
Councilmember Barron,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito,
Yes.
Councilmember Tice,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards,
Yes.
and Mayor Potter.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous.
Thank you, and again, Robin, thank you for an excellent job. All righty, the next item is approved fiscal year 2021-22, carryover and proposed fiscal year 2022/23 capital improvement projects, planned projects, and provide direction to staff. Chip, did you want to speak to this before I go to Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, yes. You know, we got some great direction from you, council. I believe it was back in March, and we built the CIP around that direction. Obviously, we had to have to recommend tapping into fund balance to the tune of about $2 million to really hit the most important project in my mind, at least, and I thought that's the way you were going as well, which is the police department renovation and expansion. And so again, that's why again we're recommending in the budget to tap into our fund balance to the tune of what is it, about 11 or 12% of what we have in fund balance. But we think it's really worthwhile. And again, for the last 2 years, even though Bob's gotten a lot done, we've gotten less done than we would have in a non-pandemic situation. So this is an action item before you. We are happy to answer any questions, but in the end, we hope that you'll adopt the budget for CIP. And what'll happen then, of course, is the approved capital projects will go on to the Planning Commission, and Brandon and his Planning Commission will do a general plan and zoning code consistency analysis. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bob?
Thank you, Chip. Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'd like to present the fiscal year 2022-23 capital improvement program. First, I'll briefly recap the March 22nd special council meeting that this first was introduced. I'll briefly review the CIP prioritization strategies. We'll review the 12 carryover projects from this current fiscal year and talk about 25 new capital projects that are recommended for the next fiscal year. Briefly talk about 4 special projects that we expect that will be funded and/or are funded and implemented by others. We'll review the 5-year CIP versus the financial forecast. I wanted to drill down especially on the CIP implementation strategies and alternatives. And then we'll ask council to approve the carryover and proposed projects and to direct staff to go to the Planning Commission for consistency review, and that is scheduled for May the 11th. At the special meeting on March 22nd, Fred Muir, who's the interim public works director, reviewed this CIP prioritization strategies. It was on the next slide. You'll recall that he really emphasized the poor condition of our buildings and facilities. So you'll see a heavy emphasis on our new projects this year with a lot of facility maintenance and repair projects. On March 22nd, we reviewed 17 completed projects that were completed so far this fiscal year or will be done by June 30th. Fred introduced 12 carryover projects, and there has been no change since March 22nd. He introduced 18 projects at that time. Since then, we've kind of untangled some of those projects. We've updated costs. We've added a few mostly minor ones. So that 18 has become 25. And then it was Councilmember Tice that asked the question of the day, do we have the capacity to implement all this? So that is a key question. The 5 CIP prioritization strategies are as follows. We have deferred maintenance. And the key here is not to fix the thing that's broken the worst, it's to fix the things before they rapidly decline into disrepair. We want to leverage outside funding as much as possible, enhance public safety. A new category this year is resilience. So we want to start looking at sustaining our assets and operations due to long-term disruptions of power. And CIP planning, which is our projects that properly scope and budget for future CIP projects. Okay, so here's the first half of the 12 carryover projects. The first one is the Mission Trail Nature Preserve tank and well demolition project. We have some good news here is that we can abandon the well in place as opposed to having to decommission it. So that will save us some money. We'll also be able to remove the stone pump house at that time. So we haven't made any progress on that project, but we have done some research. Next is the Scenic Pathway barrier rails. A picture that follows this slide kind of tells the whole story. Our next project that will be going out to bid next month is our paving project. This will include Junipero, paving on San Carlos, the San Carlos bike route and landscaped islands, work on San Antonio, and the Mission sidewalk repairs. We spent some of that money. We have $572,000 of city funds, plus $362,000 of external funds. We spent some of that in design, so we're recommending that we carry over the balance on those two. The next project is the wayfinding signs. We have not made any progress on that, so we want to carry that forward. The next is Mission Trail Nature Preserve stream projects. These are 3 small drainage projects. We are over 30% in design, and we're starting to get our environmental permits, so that project is moving. We want to forward the balance into next fiscal year. Our forest management plan, last night, Council approved the $150,000 CAL FIRE grant, so we can do a nice job on our forest management plan. The next is the PD radio antenna. The contract has been awarded. This is just a matter of carrying forward the funds and paying it off next year. On the left, that's our water tank and Mission Trail. It makes a good graffiti canvas, as well as the safety liability. The picture in the middle doesn't need any explanation. That's the Scenic Pathway barrier rails. The picture on the right shows the stressed pavement along Junipero, which will be part of our paving project. The remaining carryover projects, the PD renovation, with the original scope, that was the $2 million that's already been approved. We'll talk about that project in a moment. Next project is the ambulance for $250,000. You recall council approved or accepted a $50,000 donation a few months ago. The next is the beach sand survey and wall inspection project. We have not started that project, but we wanted to roll that forward into the coastal engineering report as recommended by the Climate Committee. Next project is the drainage system repairs or design. Just haven't made much progress there either, but we want to roll forward that $100,000. And last is the library's master plan for $50,000. We've started that project, but we have a long ways to go. In total, we have $3.3 million of city funds and $800,000 of external funds. Roll over the balance of those projects into the new fiscal year. The photo on the left, obviously, is our police building. The original $2 million project, which we'll call phase 1 only for purposes of tonight's discussion, that includes the disabled parking space, the ramp where the wall is on the far right, an ADA restroom off the lobby. The front doors would be ADA accessible. We'd replace the roof and the mansard shingles, repair some of the mechanical equipment, but that's pretty much it for the $2 million. On the right-hand side, that is a photo of our beach. And you'll see that it makes sense to combine that project with the sand movement with the coastal engineering report because it's 2 parts of the same thing. Wanted to point out that we do have a problem with our sandstone and erosion problems on the beach today. And in 2 weeks, we'll be paying a contractor using a bulldozer to push a lot of sand up, cover that up. So that should give us a good 6 months of coverage. That's coming out of the Public Works operating budget. It's on the CIP project. So that's really it for our carryover projects. Now we can turn our attention over to the proposed new projects. First is the Sunset Center hazardous material remediation and external painting. We don't think the $150,000 will cover the full project because we do have lead paint on the exterior, and we do have some asbestos. It's mostly a lead paint issue that we have. We think for 150 we can go a long way, and we'll see how far we can get and then budget for a final project at a subsequent year. We wanted to combine that with the next project for the cottage windows. We do have a problem with those windows. I think one fell out, and we want to fix them before the next ones fall out. Next project is the exterior and interior painting for the main library for $200,000. We're proposing $100,000 for the carpet replacement in the main library, $100,000 for the City Hall roof replacement because our roof is 40 years old and it leaks all the time. The City Hall retaining wall repair, if you go out to the south parking lot right outside this wall, it turns out it's not just a planter wall that's decorative, it's a structural wall. So it's a problem. We need to remove the planter wall and the dirt and pour concrete footings underneath the existing footing. So that's a big deal. So we're proposing $100,000 to do that. And that's really an emergency basis, but we just got plans the other day to show that repair. Next is a Vista Lobos interior remodel. Just the design portion, we'll have a photo of that. We're proposing $25,000 for beautification projects. This could really be put into the Forest and Beach operating budget, or it could be a standalone CIP project, but it's really meant to help volunteers or buy materials for downtown beautification and landscaping enhancements. And last is our street sweeper. It's time to get a new street sweeper. We're looking at a $550,000 for an electric sweeper, of which $200,000 would be covered by the Central Coast Community Energy Group. On the left is Sunset Center exterior painting and cottage windows. It doesn't do justice. I think if you walk around the building, you can really see the deterioration of the paint and the windows, but it kind of is a snapshot of, it doesn't look good. On the right-hand side, that's the City Hall retaining wall. That is a problem. At first we thought, well, we'll just replace the wood and bolt it back together. We're not that lucky. And in fact, the wall footings have cracks in it today, so we have a problem there. On the left-hand side, that's the Vista Lobos interior remodel. If you recall, Mira was saying about our staff, we're bursting at the seams in our facilities today. So we need to expand. We thought the easiest way to go forward is to take that community room, Vista Lobos, add modular furniture. We need some insulation and some lighting and some upgrades, but we're proposing for next year to design those upgrades and then the subsequent year to put in modular furniture and house more staff in there. And on the right-hand side, that's our street sweeper. It's our sweeper is 12 years old. If you look to the bottom right, you'll see a little piece of traffic sign that was welded to the blower housing to repair it. The next projects, we have the concrete street repairs on Ocean Avenue, along San Carlos and several intersections. That was the project that was before you last night. Hot off the press is that our maintenance of effort in the staff report last night was $579,000. We just found out from TAMC that the new number is $626,000. So we'll have to be putting that into our amended budget at the next meeting. Next project are the construction of those 3 drainage repair projects at Mission Trail Nature Preserve. And that's $25,000 of city funds and $117,000 of the parks per capita grant. So it's mostly grant funded. The next, the community planning and building are requesting 2 residential electric vehicles as opposed to the 1 vehicle they have outside. The net cost of the city would be $5,000, and we're looking at selling the existing vehicle and getting about $10,000 of grant funds. So we'll be able to pay for two vehicles for $30,000. The next is the police building, the additional scope that was talked about at the last couple of meetings. The initial budget was 1.3 million. We think that number is low. We don't know what the cost would be at this point. The additional scope of work would include the Emergency Operations Center / community room, a report taking area, updating the locker rooms that definitely need to be done, adding the EV charger, et cetera. What that triggers, when we're talking to the architect, that triggers potential building code changes, but building wide. For example, we may need to put fire sprinklers in the whole building to make those improvements. We may need to do seismic upgrades for the whole building based on these improvements. We don't know yet. So we kind of have to wait and see, but right now we're still proposing putting in $1.3 million to begin that effort, and I'll leave it at that. The next project is our ADA upgrades for year 5 for $15,000. Good news, I spoke to the state architect's office just last week. They were asking about our ADA program, told them all about it. They thought it was great. So they were happy with our progress and said, keep going. Next project is just simply a lease payment. Last year we bought 22 radios for the police department, and we'll be paying $30,000 a year for the next 5 more years. So this is year 2. And last is the ambulance equipment and the automated external defibrillator. Is that right? To look that up. And that's requesting $75,000 for that. Have some photos to share. On the left-hand side, that's San Carlos at 5th. You can see the condition of our concrete pavement. It's a mess. It needs to be fully reconstructed. So what we're recommending, as I went to the council last night, recommending to just spend 1 year focusing on our concrete streets that are in complete disrepair like that. On the right-hand side, that would be the proposed electric vehicles, be 2 for community planning and building. The good news is that they could also be used for Brandon for shoes. So if he leaves his shoes at home, he has a pair right here in the parking lot. On the left-hand side, the Mission Trail Nature Preserve over by Rio Road. We have those 3 drainage projects. It's mostly small storm drain pipes, some grading. We'll have an elevated boardwalk, a short section of boardwalk there. On the right-hand side, you'll see the existing ambulance. We're going to try to salvage as much equipment as we can, but with a new ambulance, we need some new equipment as well. And the last of our proposed projects, first is the Resilience Infrastructure Pilot Project. Our initial thought there is to design either solar or a battery backup system for the PD, Public Works, Vista, Lobos, and the Youth Center. And this, we already have a diesel generator for 3 of the 4 buildings. But if we have a long-term power outage, we might not be able to get diesel all that quickly. So this is kind of thinking out further down the road what we can do to become self-sufficient for at least for emergency operations in the long term. The next are electrical panel upgrades. Just to design them, $75,000 is proposed. The picture on the next slide tells the tale there. The next is the coastal engineering report that we talked about. It's really highly recommended by the Climate Committee. That's $150,000. Next is the North Dunes restoration. The $10,000 would be continue our biological monitoring. We have a lot of volunteer work. It's been fantastic to clear the weeds and plant native plantings. We have good reason to suspect that volunteers will donate funds for split rail fencing along San Antonio and Ocean, as well as interpretive signage. The next are the public access property records and GIS upgrades, year 2 of 2. If you've been through the planning department, you'll see that there's a whole lot less file cabinets. So this would kind of complete that project. Next is the main library generator for $60,000, a UPS system for IT for $20,000, and we have 2 CIP planning projects. First is the drainage system repairs, phase 2. This would be $500,000 in addition to the $100,000 rollover. We believe that $600,000 combined will be sufficient to pay for the 6 worst drainage bottlenecks and broken pipes in our system. The repairs to that would be $7 million, but we're not there yet. We're trying to get those things designed and have shelf-ready plans and start seeking grant funding at a future date. And the last one is facility inspections for $85,000. We did have facility inspections done about 10 years ago. Unfortunately, it was only, it's helpful, it's a good start, but it's only cursory. It didn't really go into the equipment to identify how much longer the HVAC system will last, how much longer the boilers will last. It just talked about the square footage and the age of the building and that type of thing. So we want to do that and be able to plan ahead for future facility projects. On the left-hand side, this is Vista Lobos. We took this picture when we were thinking about adding an electric vehicle charging station, and then we covered it back up quickly and ran away. There's a spider. You can't really see the spider in the bottom right. We have the same idea at City Hall and 2 other buildings. So this will be looking at 4 buildings, working with PG&E to start upsizing our conductors from PG&E, as well as replacing and making safety upgrades to our electrical panels, and to allow for more EV chargers in the future, as well as more computers and more staff, that type of thing. On the right-hand side, we talked about putting in a split rail fence along San Antonio. You can see on the right, along San Antonio, there's no defined edge of the North Dunes. So we think with the split rail, it will kind of define the edge of the facility. On the bottom left, this is the planning department. Those are the files that we've all seen. On the right-hand side is from our drainage system master plan. We have, in this photo, you'll see 2 dislocated joints in a short segment of drainage pipe. So that kind of keeps me up at night. Last, we have 4 special projects that we anticipate being done by others. The first one is the Scout House renovation. We believe the rough cost to renovate the Scout House is about $400,000. I do have an RFP sitting on my desk. It's 90% complete. The city attorney's waiting for it. We know that. So this would be an RFP for renovation, operations, and maintenance of the facility. We'll be going back to council the next couple of months to ask council for authorization to advertise it, to solicit proposals. The next is from the CRA. They're proposing to give us $55,000 for a split rail fence on a zigzag pattern along Ocean Avenue medians. They have submitted some plans, is in the plan review. This will need commission approvals. It will need a council to accept the project as well as accept the donation. And then the thought here is that the city would hire the contractor, whereas on the Scout House, the selected entity would actually design and construct the renovation. The next one is the Mission Trail Biolo Footbridge. This will be at the north end of the Doolittle Trail. The design is already in progress. It's on a pro bono basis. And Friends of Mission Trail and Carmel Cares are proposing to finish the design, build it, all to our city standards, all at their cost. So that's a good project. And last is the Scenic Pathway Barrier Rails that Carmel Cares is eager to perform. We suggest splitting up the funds, the city funds of the $50,000 carryover from what Carmel Cares can do, because they can go forward without having to implement the project as a state, under state requirements as a public works project and pay prevailing wages. So we think we might want to split that up. I've talked to Dale Burns about that. We have more discussion to do, but that's the game plan as of today. Okay, so the top table talks about breaking down the city funding for the $5 million for this next fiscal year. On the first row, that's the CIP and the Vehicle Equipment Fund. In more detail, the Vehicle Fund was $685,000, and the CIP Fund would be about 1.5 million. So there's 2.145 million, or 42% of the $5 million total for next year. The external funding estimate is $788,000, which is 16%. Those first 2 numbers adds up to 2.9 million. And then now we're looking at using that fund balance in red, the 2.095 million, which would be another 42%, and the grand total would be 5 million.
Real quickly, Bob, I'm sorry. So if you look at your budget book, Council, the last pages are fund balance charts. So you'll see that number, that $2,095,000, which is, again, the reduction in the fund balance that we're recommending as part of this budget for, again, this capital work. So you'll see that number consistently throughout the narrative, Bob's tables and charts, as well as the budget table and charts. Thank you, Bob.
Sure, thank you. The bottom table is just really the big picture of what the city's total investment is for our infrastructure and revitalization of our infrastructure. So we just simply added the 12 carryover projects with the city and external funding, and that's 4.2 million of carryover. The 25 proposed new projects of the 5.029 million for the new. Grand total would be 37 projects with a total value of 9.2 million. So that's a big, significant investment into our infrastructure if you look at it as a big picture.
Let me jump in again. You know, Mr. Barron asked me about whether we've got the capacity. You know, we do have a project manager that we've been unsuccessful in recruiting. So again, what Bob has done is he's got RFPs. We have some consultants to do some design work for us and to manage projects. And as part of our mass SOQ, Statement of Qualifications process, we should getting proposals or qualifications from other firms that can, again, implement projects for us, design and implement to get the projects done that Mr. Barron, again, referenced.
Right. Chip was one slide ahead of me. That's okay. Okay, so going back to Councilwoman Tice's question, can we do all this? So the first question in bold, can we really fully implement all 12 carryovers and 25 proposed projects, 37 total, in fiscal year 22-23? The answer is no. There's going to be inevitable scope changes. There'll be third-party delays. We'll get high bids. We have staffing shortage to start off with. But it's okay. All agencies have carryover projects. That's normal. I think the more important question would be the second one. Can the majority of the backlog plus the proposed workload be accomplished? And there, I believe the answer is yes, if we do these implementation strategies. One example we do have is that we completed 17 projects in this current fiscal year without having a project manager at all. Even though most of those projects were small, we're still getting some done. So what we're proposing for one strategy is to combine similar projects. So there I won't read them all, but there's 13 different projects that we can break it down into 6. So it's like a net 7 projects that don't vanish. It's just the remaining 6 have a lot more parts to it. But let's look at the first one. The main library exterior and interior painting can be bundled with the Sunset Center cottage windows and the Sunset Center exterior paint. They're all going to have lead paint issues. They're all going to have window issues. They're all going to be similar. If we have one project with one project manager, one design consultant, one contractor, it makes it more efficient for everybody, as well as it's less costly because we can hire one contractor that's going to do all 3 of those projects at once. So that's one strategy. Another strategy is to continue to assign projects to multiple departments. And this strategy was successful this year, and we're proposing to keep going. So we completed 17 projects this year. We think we can do 18 next year. The police department will handle 4 of them. Brandon will handle 2. IT has 1. Public Works has 11. So this is kind of business as usual. So this is not I mean, we're all saturated with work today, but this is not additional burden. This is kind of maintaining the status quo. And in terms of hiring project managers, as Chip was talking about, we are recommending to have a continuous recruitment for the in-house project manager. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful so far, but we can keep going. We do have one consultant for Leaf who's serving as a project manager for our current fiscal year paving project that's getting ready to go on to bid now. The mass SOQs is what Chip was referring to, so we'll be getting qualifications in at the end of May. And what we'll be doing, the first thing we're going to be doing is looking at project management consultants and going to council hopefully in July with a new professional service agreement. Hey, we can hire one or two or three project manager consultants to help us with the backlog and on working on these new projects. Now that's going to be costly, so the consultant fees would be charged directly to those capital projects. So that would reduce the amount of construction quantities. So hypothetically, instead of building 10 widgets, we can maybe only build 8 widgets. We'll have to sacrifice the 2 to pay for the consultant to serve as our project manager. It's a way to go. It's great for the short term. It's not so cost effective in the long term, but we think now's the time with the shortage of staff. Now's the time to hire consultants. Last, we have some ideas to cut back on the use of the fund balance. Again, we're proposing to use that 2.09 million, but if you want to trim, here's what we recommend first. The first would be the main library carpet for $100,000. We should defer that until at least the library master plan is done. And if we also have painting to do, so if that's deferred a year, that's fine. Another way to look at it is keep it in this fiscal or the next fiscal year to show the library patrons that we're committing funding for the library. The next is a resilience pilot project. It's another important and needed project, but we could sacrifice that for a year. The scenic pathway barriers, once the next focus will have Carmel Cares start the project. We could throttle back a year. Again, it's a council option if you want to throttle back the money. We still recommend going forward with it. It needs to be done, but maybe that could be done in a subsequent year. On the drainage design, with the 100,000 initial, with the 500,000 proposed new, that's $600,000. We could trim that to $400,000, saving $200,000 for fund balance next year. The catch there is you're dragging out the duration to get all our drainage repairs done, but it is an option. And last is the PD building renovation. So right at the default is we combined it into one bigger project with 2 parts. That's still recommended. If council wants to throttle back on some of the funding, what we would recommend there is split it up into 2 phases. Go forward with phase 1, the $2 million. The 1.3 million for phase 2, we don't need that all yet. We have to first design all those additional improvements. So if we capture 300,000 of those for additional improvements, throttle back the $1 million for the following year when we'll need it, that's something we could do. Not recommending it. It would be more expensive in the long run. And in fact, we'd be kind of adding another project that's, instead of being combined, we'd split it into 2. So it's an option if the council really wants to trim back on the use of the fund balance. And finally, we have the CIP in years 2 through 5, the big picture. In your packet, you have this chart, which is hard to read. We're proposing to put that into the budget book as well as onto our website like we have now, as well as this pie chart, which kind of summarizes years 2 through 5. Put that also on the website and in our budget book. And let's see. And also just wanted to state, we don't anticipate that we're going to have $13.9 million available over those 4 years. We're not kidding ourselves, but it seems to be it's our job to tell the council, hey, we need that. Our infrastructure is falling apart. We have some real damage to repair. This is what, in a snapshot in time, this is what we think we need for the subsequent years. And the more we defer, the more it will cost eventually.
In that vein, council, there is a sweet spot. There is a number that we'll share with you on the 17th, which does not rely on fund balance, but again, we don't reach that $14 million threshold for all the required maintenance over a 5-year period. If we continue to delve into fund balance, we will exhaust that within that 5-year period. So again, we are recommending, and this is the first time in my recollection since I've been back with the village, that we're recommending tapping into fund balance for a non-emergency basis. But it kind of is an emergency, right? Because again, we used fund balance to balance the budget in 2020, because that's when the pandemic hit. And then we deferred a lot of substantial, larger scale, as Bob was saying. We did a lot of projects less than $100,000 in the last year, but not any of the ones that are really significant, like the PD remodel. So that's why, again, we're very, very confident in saying this is the time, this is the safe time to go ahead and delve into fund balance. So Bob had that slide in there about alternatives, but that's not what we're recommending. We are recommending that we go the full $2,095,000 into fund balance and really hit that deferred maintenance, including the PD, like a bomb.
That's right. It was just alternatives we wanted to trim. We're not recommending any of those. So to kind of wrap up, recommendation is the council approves this 12 carryover projects from this current fiscal year into next year, to approve all 25 of the CIP projects proposed for 22 or 23, or now's the time to delete some projects, defer projects, add projects. Also asking to approve the 4 special projects if funded and implemented by others. Accept the 5-year CIP as an exhibit to the budget book. Authorize the use of available fund balance to cover the proposed projects as written in the staff report. And direct staff to present the CIP to the Planning Commission next week for general plan consistency review. That completes my presentation. Sorry it's kind of long, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Long but very thorough. I appreciate that, Bob. Are there any questions of Bob before I go out to the public? Jeff?
Thank you, Mayor. 2 questions. On the easy one first, the Scenic Pathway barrier rails repair. Back in the days when I was on Forest and Beach, Rob Mullane took out a bunch of barrier rails and replaced them with a bunch of the wooden fencing and replaced it with that metal fencing.
Post and rail.
Post and cable, right? Is there a plan to go back to what was originally in the specifications for the path, which is presumably that wooden fencing, or are we just going to have to live with that metal fencing forever?
What was approved is the original design plans from 1984, I believe. The default is to restore all of the barrier rails to that original plan. I do believe Carmel Cares has alternate plans that they can certainly present to the Planning Commission and planning staff for their consideration. But I believe the post and cable railing and the other, they do look different today. The intent, I believe, is to make it all consistent again like it used to when it was first built.
So this project that's in the CIP budget that we're going to approve, this $50,000 and whatever Carmel Cares contributes, that will get rid of the wire, the metallic fencing this coming year?
Eventually, yes. I don't know to what extent Carmel Cares will be modifying the barrier rails. Hopefully they do a lot of it, and the remaining $50,000 the city funds will complete the whole pathway.
Okay, so I'll work with you and we'll get that straightened out.
Eventually, it's our desire to remove the cable rail and replace it with wood barriers.
Right. Okay, and then the tank and well replacement, I think we did that, and Carrie and Bobby, and I guess Dave too might remember, I think it was the first year I was on the council, so 3 budget cycles ago, we allocated this money to, remove the tank and fill the well. Right? Is that right? Remove
what I recall, Councilman Barron, was 2 years ago we first introduced it as a possibility, but it was not funded. It was funded for this current fiscal year, but not executed. So we're asking to roll it over into next year.
But the project has changed now, right? So now we're going to somehow abandon it. We're not just going to go in with and I know this isn't how it works, but we're not going to go in with a big crane and just lift the thing out and put it somewhere else.
Right.
It's still going to be sort of blighty.
Right. Unfortunately, well, there's certain steps we have to take to meet the county health department. But fortunately, we don't have to remove the well. We can abandon it in place with capping it and doing certain...
Yeah, the well's going to go away, the tank's going to leave.
So the tank is going to leave.
Right.
Okay, so that's, okay, great. Right. So the tank is going to leave and the well is going to get either filled up or abandoned or something like that.
Correct.
So it will look and feel sort of pristine.
Correct.
When the project is done.
Correct.
Okay.
And that pump house with the stone pump house will also go away. So you won't see any evidence of anything there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Bob? Karen, any questions?
Yes, I do have a question. I recall, I thought it was last year, we approved fixing the sidewalks on San Carlos. And I don't see any reference to that. I think it was going to be asphalt and we approved pavers or something. Are those sidewalk projects? I know you spoke to the Mission Street, but I recently walked on San Carlos and it is in dire need of some work.
I think the answer is yes, it's included in our bid documents for the paving project that's going out to bid next month. We are a little skeptical with the bid prices going up and up and up that we'll be able to afford it, but it's in the bid package. So we'll have prices here in a few months. We'll be able to decide at that point, do we want to pay that kind of money to get that sidewalk fixed? And I'm assuming it's the same sidewalk area you're referring to. I know Mission has a couple of areas, and I think San Carlos has an area or two as well.
Councilmember, you're remembering correctly, we did add in, which is an asphalt sidewalk now. We added in that segment of sidewalk.
Right.
And I believe, Bob, you're correct that it is in the bid documents for remove and replace.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So, Bob, when Councilmember Richards and I were interviewing representatives for the Harrison Memorial Library Board, one of them mentioned that they had a concern that perhaps some of the work that was going to be done, whether it's the carpet or the painting, would be maybe superfluous or redundant if they went ahead and didn't have the master plan done first. What are your thoughts on that?
Ideally, we get the master plan completely done. We don't think the master plan is going to change much on the exterior paint. It may modify over a long period of time to modify some rooms in the interior of the main library. That is true. However, that could be many, many years down the road, and the paint today is in need of repainting today. There is a potential that if we go too fast, the master plan will say, well, gee, let's change this into another gathering room, perhaps, and we'll have wasted a little bit of paint, but we think the big picture is we need to paint it inside and outside, and we need to do it sooner rather than later.
What about the carpet?
Carpet, that was a possibility of just deferring it another year.
It's in pretty rough shape. You know, we did have the donors who did the meeting room, Ms. Buck and others, and it's already being a well-used room, but it's pretty rough shape. You know, the document that we always include in the budget book, and the answer is, again, is the MOA between the library board and the city council, which requires us to maintain both libraries. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll go up there myself and look at both those items in consideration of your question for the meeting of the 17th, and maybe take some pictures. But my recollection is in the main branch. Remember, we replaced the park branch, the children's library, several years ago, and that was really bad shape. You know, kids, they were on the floor, so we really need to do something handsome there.
It'd just be a little bit like when you go ahead and pave a street and then they come along and rip it up so you can put a new sewer line in. I'd hate to see us go ahead and have that element of redundancy.
We'll work with Ms. Wright as well. It's a good question. We can add that to the questions.
All right.
I agree. I think we did for Chip to follow up with that.
Good. All righty, so I'll open it up to the public then. Bob, thanks for the presentation. Is there anybody in the public wishing to comment on this item tonight? Yes. Do come forward.
My name is Brian Sowers. I'm a resident of Carmel-by-the-Sea, as well as a Forest and Beach Commissioner. And I wanted to make the City Council and you, Mayor Potter, aware of the fact that on a number of occasions I brought up at Forest and Beach Commission meetings about the state of the beach and the sand remediation that has been put off for a number of years, whether it's the COVID and the budget aspects of what's been going on in Carmel. I don't know if anyone's been down to the Del Mar Beach area and what I call the volleyball beach hill, but we've got some very, very serious sandstone problems there, and the infrastructure in that dune is collapsing. And I think it's a really important aspect of the city. It's part of our brand. It's part of who we are. And that whole Del Mar dune, as well as the volleyball dune, is in a really bad shape of disrepair. I know Mr. Herrera had stated the fact that in the next 3 weeks we're going to have MPE come in and move some sand. I think that's fine. I'd also, in speaking with him, I'd said it might be helpful to have Ms. Canepa, who I believe did some consulting on the North Dunes project, and she is a dune specialist, to maybe get some consulting time with her or have her take a view into this before we start pushing sand again. In looking at the overall shoreline management plan that was put together by a previous administration probably a decade ago, we really as a city have not moved forward on anything in regards to keeping the shoreline management plan active in working with moving the beach infrastructure forward. I know we've got a survey that's to be done as a part of the budget plan for $150,000, which will address climate, where it was going to be addressed as part of the climate action plan. The embankments that are going to be potentially challenged by the coastal commission, or the coastal warming that could be happening downstream here. But I want to emphasize the fact that the Del Mar Beach and the Del Mar Hill and the volleyball hill, as well as the other sand remediation, is again a short-term fix with moving sand. But I really think we needed to take a hard look at this, because it's going to be very costly if we continue to let that hill get degraded with the storm water flow that goes down, as well as just the amount of vacationers that use the sand hill and trouble down it during the summertime, and the sand gets moved down the hill, and then the sandstone is exposed. And so right now, if you go down there, it is in disrepair, and I appreciate the fact that we're going to move some sand, but I think we really need to take a harder look at this. And I appreciate your attention to that issue. I know I'll continue with that as in my Forest and Beach Commission role to bring that forward, and I appreciate your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Brian, I appreciate your testimony. Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Anybody in the Zoom world that would like to speak?
Dave, I'm here. This is Dale Byrne.
Dale.
Good evening. So first, I'd like to really state that we really appreciate at Carmel Cares the unique and collaborative relationship that we've established with the city, and in particular the Public Works Department, Bob and Sarah and her forestry team. And we appreciate your vote of confidence in putting us in a number of projects. As Bob stated, we've been talking about different approaches, and I've also spoken with you, Mayor Potter, in a couple meetings about how to get us moving on some of these projects. And I think, without going into detail, Bob and I have discussed a strategy at Forest Hill Park that I think might work out, where it involves providing materials and so on, and then we're executing the project. So I'd like to continue those discussions, Bob, and I think we can come up with some really good ways to get these projects moving. But while we've been waiting for the safety barrier project on Scenic, I'm not sure that everybody knows, certainly Public Works knows, that we have been working on some significant safety improvements. We worked with Public Works to fix the landing at the top of 10th, 11th. We're about to do 8th, where there were some significant slip potentials. We've also increased the height of the stone walls at all the 4 major stone stairways to prevent erosion, which then creates safety issues with sand on the stairways. It also lessens the work on our Wednesday session. So we have been hard at work, and we appreciate the ability to move forward on those projects and the confidence that you've placed in us. And thank you for the great reports that you did. I tried to comment on the budget report that Robin and Russell put together, which I thought was outstanding. And I'm sorry I didn't do it at the right time, but it was an excellent report. And the prose was good. The numbers were good. I do have some questions about some headcount adds on that, but I'll take it up with Bob, because I'm sure he can answer my questions offline. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you for all you do. Appreciate it. Anybody else tonight? Last call. Anybody else wishing to speak to this item?
Hi there, can you hear me? My hand is up. Mayor Potter?
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, terrific,
Yeah,
great.
okay, great, I do, yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. My comments are brief. I applaud the city for replacing its street sweeper. The current one is very loud, which does not befit our community's character of being a nice, peaceful, quiet place. I can hear it clearly from my house some mornings kicking on, and so I'm delighted to know that the city will soon be replacing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Appreciate it. Anybody else? I don't see anybody.
I don't-
Is there
There are
anybody
no more
else wishing to
speakers
speak?
here.
All right, I'll close the public comment, bring it back to council for direction. Council membership preference. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. I'll go first. Thank you for all the work, Bob, that you have done putting this together. To answer a couple questions, I am okay with the fund balance reductions that you specify. I'm okay with not making the budget smaller, personally. I do still have some, I've mentioned this before, I do still have some serious concerns about the police station project. And I think when, I've talked to Chip about this a little bit, and I think that my concerns are best reflected in the couple paragraphs that are in the staff report about the police station project. One of my concerns is, one concern that's sort of apart from the others is, should the EOC be in the same building as the police station? If we have a disaster in town, whatever the disaster might look like, whether it's an asteroid hitting the police station or a big storm or an earthquake or whatever, it just doesn't make sense to me that the EOC, the emergency EOC is in the same building as the police station. And I can accept that, but I would like to have a if I had my druthers, I would have a presentation to the council from the police department on why, on the specific topic of why the EOC belongs in the specific building of the police station. Like, that is a policy sort of strategic decision that I am not comfortable making yet. Councilmember Richards has mentioned in the past, and I have joined him in, this discussion about a mobile EOC, and I'm not sure that that's I'm not sure that that either is the right decision, but right now it feels like my thoughts on the EOC are sort of fumbling around in the dark, and I'm not comfortable with that yet, with that item, with that facet of the project. And then when I read the EOC, when I read the description of this project in the CIP report, there are lots of red flags. This project, and I'll read some of them. This project may trigger additional code required improvements, such as a sprinkler system, ADA facilities, seismic upgrades, replacement of the electrical wiring. Now, some of those things I would say, why are we not putting a sprinkler system in the police department anyway? And I don't understand, are we skimping on the original $2 million project and not putting a sprinkler system in what we're redoing just because we don't have to? I don't understand those things. And that can of worms sounds like a big can of worms to me. It sounds like the project isn't quite, we don't really understand the scope of the project. And then, that paragraph ends by saying, please be advised that the cost may go higher. So $1.3 million isn't enough. And $1.3 million sounds like it's not enough, but we're not quite sure what it is. So we're not quite sure where we are. And then the report continues, as the design of this project additions progress, it may be advisable at some future point to split the project back into 2 phases. So sort of end up where we are, maybe not end up where we are. Not quite sure. Second phase to include the EOC, locker rooms, report taking area, charging station. I read this and it sounds, there are lots of red flags. And to me, it sounds like the project isn't baked enough to come to the council for what will surely be $1.5 million. Like, it doesn't sound like we're ready to make that allocation of money. And I'm open to making that allocation of money. I hear Chip saying that it makes sense to do the police station as one thing. And I'm open to that, but I'm not there yet. And, you know, this reminds me of the sort of police station stuff that was going on 4 or 5 years ago, when the project just kind of crept up in size and crept up in size and crept up in size. And now we're on the same path. And I know that we're not, you know, I understand that we're not on that path, but the landscape looks the same. You know, the red flags look the same to me. And so I'm not comfortable with that, with the extra allocation of that money yet. Thank you, and that's my only comment. Thank you.
All right, are there any other concerns or questions? Carrie?
So thank you, Bob. This was very thorough. And when you look at what we're supposed to be kind of moving forward here, hold on, I'm getting back. You know, I believe that we should do the 12 capital improvement projects carry over. I understand Jeff's concern about the police department, and the last time we discussed the police department, we were looking for a presentation by the chief about the EOC issue, and I think we just haven't gotten there yet with everything else that's been going on. So I think right now Bob has allocated $2 million, right? You know, this project is probably going to take that. And so I'm comfortable with the $2 million, and it's going to be a process that we're going to have to evaluate as we go and as we get more information, because we added to this project and the staff just hasn't had time to figure it all out. So I'm hoping we can get, once the budget is passed, we can then have that presentation on especially the EOC issue. So I'm comfortable with the $2 million with more information to come, as they say. I'm okay with the 4 special projects, and I think it is time that we use fund balance to strengthen our capital improvements here. Thank you.
I'd agree with that entirely. I also think that the barrier wall or the barrier fence or barrier on the scenic pathway is important too. It really is in horrible disrepair and it's a hazard right now. Jeff, I do understand your concerns about the budget, but I do think that if we proceed ahead with the sort of a barren caveat associated with it, we could go ahead and make sure that we're watching it with the level of scrutiny you just discussed. So, Karen, did you have anything from Dubrovnik?
Actually, I'm in split.
We are, really. I thought you were split.
Yes. But, yes, my earpod's falling out here. I'm comfortable with this budget. Obviously, it's more money than we've imagined, but we are playing catch up and we are badly behind the 8 ball there. We have been talking about scenic pathway renovations forever, and the barrier walls certainly are worthy. I am wondering if the $50,000 for the split rail fence down Ocean Avenue doesn't get approved for some reason by the Planning Commission in the future, if there'd be any perhaps agreement with the CRA that they might put that towards the split rail fence at Del Mar, if that would happen. I do like the fact that our many volunteer groups are stepping up and doing some design work and also trying to raise funds. I think that that's really important. So I am a bit overwhelmed by the immensity of all this, and I do commend Bob for an excellent report. I don't know how you've gotten all this done, but as far as the police department, I think it may end up being even more than what this says, but it has languished long enough. And I hope what Carrie said is true, that we'll be hearing more about the EOC in the very near future. Thank you.
That said, then do we have a motion here to go ahead and approve with the caveats as noted? Bob, did you hear what we've said? Okay. Yeah, okay, so I'll move that we approve the budget as proposed, capital improvement.
So what's the question? What's the protection for me and my issues with respect to the EOC and sort of the red light, you know, my concerns about all this verbiage about additional costs here and additional costs there. What's the protection that you're not, not you, but that staff isn't going to come back to the council 8 months from now and present us with another $900,000 bill?
It's a good question, if I may. I think that what the mayor is saying, and we totally support this, is there'll be communication as we glean information. So again, the chief will come back in the next couple of meetings and talk about the merits of a fixed EOC versus a mobile EOC, and then all the issues that you've raised about, an asteroid, or what are the impacts or the dangers of having an EOC attached to this kind of a facility. Bob will continue to work with our architects who were signed up to hone those numbers and to answer those questions about those red flags, and whether, again, electrical upgrade, seismic upgrade, sprinkler system will be required. So we're not going to spring this on you, Mr. Barron. We'll be, the mayor always talks about the art of good governance is communication, and so we'll be communicating very, very closely with you as information is received.
Yeah, my concern, so thank you for that. My concern is that, projects kind of acquire a life of their own. And, it's much more difficult and so let me preface my comments by saying I will support this budget, as it is, given your comments. But I'm very concerned that expensive projects like this acquire lives of their own. And it becomes difficult, it will become difficult for us if we have a $3.3 million project to say no. It's much more difficult to say no to a $500,000 add-on on a $3.3 million project than it is to say no to a $1.8 million project right now. And so my concern is that we will approve this budget and we will send ourselves down this slippery slope, and it will be difficult. Like there's no exit strategy. If we say yes to this, there's really, for all intents and purposes, there's no exit strategy, and we are committed because there's nothing that will.
I'm not sure I agree with you, sir.
Okay.
And I think again, we're not just going to again spring the bid on you with a request to fund. So again, our commitment is because I realize the sensitivity. You've already put $2 million, and we're asking for another 1.3. And, it could be north of there. So before we proceed with expenditures, any out-of-pocket expenditures, when we know that cost is going to go up, we'll come back to you. Because there's nothing worse, you hit the nail on the head, nothing worse than project creep. We're not gilding this. This is not a Ferrari. This is I don't know, Brandon, what's a good utility car? This is a Ford F-150 police station, and four-wheel drive, of course. But yeah, that's what we're looking for. So again, my commitment to you, sir, is to do the homework before making financial commitments, and to communicate them back to you, not just with information, but for your approval.
And cost creep is a bit synonymous with public projects. You're right, Jeff. But I did note that when we went to go ahead and discuss with the architect, who doesn't seem to be under contract as of yet, I did say that since it was the same architect that was responsible for the first phase of the project, when we turned down, there might be some redundancy in cost estimates there. So I already raised that flag that I was concerned about the cost creeps early on. So I do share your concerns. I think the rest of the council does too. Even though we know it's an important project, we can't just run willy-nilly spending public dollars at large. So, Bobby?
Yeah, Mayor, I will be voting to approve this budget as well, but I do share Jeff's concerns, and I hope, and I don't know if the other council members feel our concern about the opportunity to possibly have a mobile EOC unit, where maybe we have a little bit more of a scaled-back EOC unit in our police station that's
And Bobby, you remember we did meet a woman the other day who had an in with the grant world at the federal level. She came back to me and said she does have some opportunities, wanted to talk to you about it.
Right.
Yeah, but we do need to get the endorsement from
So
them.
if, I don't know if the other council wants to give the chief direction in looking at a mobile EOC unit to complement a smaller EOC unit at the police station. I don't know. I think Jeff feels that way, and I know I feel that way.
Point of order, may I ask, is there a second to the motion?
Yes.
Yes, we have.
Yes, I seconded it.
Okay, I didn't hear that. Thank you.
I have asked the chief to give us a presentation. I am not going to say EOC, mobile EOC or not mobile. I don't have enough information.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so
Exactly.
that's part of the presentation, is to weigh the pluses and minuses of a mobile EOC. So,
Did you want the mobile EOC included in that presentation?
yes, uh-huh.
Good, good.
Yeah,
Let's
I
go
made
post it
that
appropriately.
clear. So we all have voted to renovate the police department. We have made that commitment, and we need to follow up on that commitment. And what we're seeing is, if it is project creep, they're going to come back and say, we wanted this, but it's going to cost this. Do you want it or not? At that point, there's going to be some decision points. That's kind of how it works. So, you know, we have made the decision to renovate this police department. We need to follow through on that with this budget.
And I'm glad to hear we're being responsible. It's how we spend the public's dollar. I think that's what we're chartered to do. So that said, unless there's any discussion, I'd call a roll, ask for a roll call on this. Ayashin?
Let's start with Councilmember Barron.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito.
Yes.
Councilmember Tice.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards.
Yes.
And Mayor Potter.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous.
So before we proceed on with the rest of tonight's business, I was wondering if anybody was thinking, especially on the council, we maybe should take a bio break for maybe 10 minutes. Why don't we return then at 7:20? Would that work? Yeah. 7:20 it'll be.
I need a nap.
Mission Ranch uses them to get back and forth with.
Yeah, there was money there, but it wasn't the stuff that we were.
All right, it's 7:20. If we could reconvene, can we get ourselves back in here, please? All righty, we are now on item number 4, which is consideration of whether or not to reconsider permanent encroachment permit EN 21-272 Fountain to retain a fence constructed in public right-of-way. Counselor, would you like to explain the rules tonight?
Yes, I would. This is a consideration of whether or not to reconsider the permanent encroachment permit. And the distinction that I wish to draw here is that the discussion tonight is not going to involve the merits of whether the application should or should not be approved. It is the decision of the council tonight to discuss whether you want to reconsider that decision. So that's the scope of the discussion tonight.
And so how would the public testimony be limited on that topic then?
Well, for example, there's provisions in your code with respect to what the standards are for issuance of an encroachment application, and it would, in my opinion, not be appropriate to spend time going through the application itself and whether it does or does not meet those standards, because that is an example of the merits of this application.
And how we got here tonight is because one person on the prevailing side of the vote wishes to reconsider?
Yes, and you're going to hear in the staff
That's
report
very good. Okay,
more
very good.
details about that.
All right, are there any questions? All right,
All right.
Brandon, brief sum-ups.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Council, the city attorney basically just gave my presentation for me.
Thank you, good. I was trying to
I'll
save
just
some
make
time
sure
here.
that I didn't miss something here. So, Sebastian, if you could put my slides up on the screen, please, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, as you know, we're here to consider reconsideration. This is not something we often do. As the city attorney pointed out, on April 5th, City Council did deny this encroachment permit. There is a section of our code that allows for any member of the majority of the voting council to have it come back on reconsideration. The code is very light. There are no standards like we have in many other of our sections of how you determine whether or not to bring this back. It's really just, it can be brought back for discussion, talk amongst yourselves and make a vote one way or the other whether or not to bring it back in the future. Really, again, you're just being asked to whether or not to reconsider, and no discussion on the merits of the application really should be discussed tonight. And that ends mine and what actually was the city council or city attorney's presentation. Thank you.
All righty, thank you. Jeff, would you like to?
Yes, thank you. So I'm the person that's requesting reconsideration of this item. I'd like the opportunity to review further the city's records regarding this property, to consider again the provision of the city's municipal code regarding encroachments, and to receive any additional public input. And those are my comments.
Thank you. All right, are there any other questions by council members on the process tonight? Okay, seeing none. Karen, I trust you're okay and split. All right, so I'll open it up to public comment. Is there anybody in the public wishing to comment on this item?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Anthony Lombardo. Councilmember Barron, I'm not certain that I can adequately express the heartfelt gratitude of the Fountains for your request for reconsideration. This has been an 8-year ordeal for them. They were given direction by city staff and former city councils on what to do with this property. They had an encroachment permit and documents that disappeared, which, as you said, we will hopefully be able to learn more about between now and then. But the Fountains, after the last hearing, were not even hardly able to speak. They literally were in tears. So again, on their behalf, I want to express their heartfelt gratitude for your request for reconsideration and would support that request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lombardo. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Evening, members of council. Ken White, on behalf of the Carmel Residents Association. We very strongly support the recall of this issue and the hopes that cooler heads will prevail at another meeting very soon, and that we don't end up with dueling attorneys and a big deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Is there anybody in the Zoom world that wishes to speak? Anybody else in the chambers wishing to speak?
Go ahead, Mr. Martin.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Who is
Thank
that?
you. Since Mr. Lombardo addressed the merits of the whether or not to, well, since Mr. Lombardo talked about the merits of the issue at stake, I will too. My comments are going to be underneath 1 minute, so I ask your indulgence. Good morning, excuse me. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Ian Martin. I'm a Carmel-by-the-Sea resident and a former planning commissioner. I'm here this evening to urge you to not revisit the decision you made last time that denied an encroachment permit. That was the right decision to have made according to the law. Specifically, Municipal Code 12.08.060, the encroachment application review standards, which your city attorney advised you to refer to when making your decision. The only justifiable reason you would have to revisit this matter would be if you somehow misunderstood those simply stated legal criteria, one of the most important of which states, and I quote, "The encroachment shall not be contrary to the public interest," unquote. A private fence running through public property is certainly not in the public's interest. The law makes it clear that denying the encroachment permit is your only option. You cannot provide the property owner with an encroachment permit according to the criteria set forth by the municipal code. So please honor the law by letting your decision to deny the encroachment permit stand. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Mayor, I don't see any more raised hands.
Hold on, let's go ahead.
My turn?
Yes, Victoria
Hi.
Beach is taking the podium.
I mentioned earlier how much we learn by listening to one another, no matter how long it takes. I don't think I could have imagined that when I spoke along with Doug Schmitz, who had to leave, and Steve Dallas and Tony Lombardo, about the illegal encroachment that we discovered in around 2014, that I would be here 8 years later talking about the same thing. But I will say I have learned a lot. And I have, in fact, learned new things this morning about what is possibly complicating this dispute that's going on. In fact, I've learned that perhaps the city may owe compensation to perhaps the earlier developer of the property, Mackey, or conversely, Mackey may, or I don't think those folks, owe compensation back to the city. There is a number of very complex documents that build up after almost a decade of working on this. I have also learned to appreciate the frustrations that are on both sides that Jeff has, I think, astutely raised, that come from a process that's a bit haphazard. And I am persuaded that these frustrations must be taken seriously. However, this has nothing to do with an encroachment permit. The best outcome of this latest round of discussions would be a thorough and factual look at what went wrong, if anything, whom was wronged, if anyone, and if so, what compensation is appropriate to the nature of that injury. You know that this serious matter is unrelated to anything that has to do with the very objective and strict review process of granting an encroachment permit. You decided that correctly and legally last month. There is a win-win option here. If you have concerns about how these folks have been treated, please take them seriously, investigate them, and have the proper response. Do not confuse that issue with someone's request for a barter or a reward of an encroachment permit that does not apply the regulations properly. So if you do reconsider it, I hope you'll reconsider it only to return a 5-0 vote on the correct side of the law, and that you will also use this opportunity today, perhaps, to suggest to staff that they pursue a serious investigation as to what has happened here, so that we can perfect our procedures so people don't have to go through this in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Don Goodhue. I think there's no issue here for reconsideration. a possible mistake was made by a staff member. This never got the blessing of the council or the planning commission. And despite Mr. Lombardo's claims, there was no permit. The owners were told, even when it was approved by the staff person, they needed to get an encroachment permit. They didn't file for it. They took out insurance. They didn't record it. So the applicants did nothing to further their position. So I don't think they have a position, whatever. And I request that you do not take this up again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Good evening. My name is Marianne Schicketans, and I'm here not to speak about this case in particular, but since I'm involved in the design guideline review, I wanted to just speak only to the encroachment permit process in general, and want to stress to everybody how important that space in the village is between the street and the property line, and between the property line and the front of the house. I think that buffer that we have between the street and the property line is extremely important to the village character. Since our properties are so expensive, rightfully every property owner wants to max out their properties. So the stress that you have on, encroaching into the public lands will get greater and greater. And I would greatly discourage you to give up that space for private use. I think it is essential for the village character, and it would set a terrible precedent if that was allowed, because where would it end? Everybody would actually get the right to encroach onto the public lands, and I don't think there is any public benefit to having a private property owner use this public space. And on the contrary, I would encourage you to put more funding towards actually planting and maintaining that public space, and also enforcing it, because this is not the only encroachment that we have in town. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marianne. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Zoom world or otherwise? I'll close the public comment period, bring it back to council. Council, your druthers, Jeff?
Well, if there are no comments, I'll make a motion.
Sounds good. Do we have any comments?
I would make a motion to,
Excuse me, I do have a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Karen, I forgot. Okay.
Yeah, I was a little slow on the unmuting. I'm not inclined to want to revisit this, because I think we made the decision based on our encroachment standards, and that's where I stand on this one.
All right. Interesting video of you here. You're sort of reaching a vanishing point.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
there
don't
you
know
go.
what
Now you're back to
happened.
normal. Yeah, thank you. All right. Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I haven't made my motion yet.
I'm sorry. I thought you made a motion.
No. I would make a motion to reconsider encroachment permit application 21-272 to retain a fence constructed in the public right-of-way.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, seeing none, could we call the roll, please, Yashin?
Councilmember Barron.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito.
No.
Councilmember Tice.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards.
Yes.
Mayor Potter.
Aye.
We have 3 yeses. The motion passes.
Okay, that is to a date not certain, though, I believe. Is that correct, Jeff? You didn't specify a date on it.
Didn't
so-
specify a date, so.
Okay, so for a future
Leave it
agenda.
to you and whoever it is that process works.
All right. Okay, now we'll move on then. So the next item is a report of process required to consider a permanent outdoor seating program in the public right-of-way. Excuse me. We've got some chatter going on in the back here. Could we have quiet in the room, please? Chief? I know you've got a gun, but please hush. Okay, so receive a report on the process required to consider a permanent outdoor seating program in the public right-of-way and provide direction to staff on whether or not to proceed with the effort as a city council top priority project. Brandon?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sebastian, if you could switch me over on the PowerPoint, please. Thank you. All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Here we are again, speaking about this time talking about permanent outdoor seating in the public right-of-way. If you recall, recent direction, City Council on April 5th did confirm that removal date for temporary parklets. They did go away on April 20th, but as part of that direction, we were asked to return to explain the process when we begin to develop the permanent program. We also are hoping tonight to receive direction about whether or not to begin as part of our top priorities and how that may impact some of the existing top 16 priority lists, which we'll talk about a little bit later. As I mentioned in the staff report, and I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because I did write the staff report. I'm sure that everybody enjoyed reading that. Three major components really when we start to develop a permanent process in earnest: public meetings, policy decisions, and regulatory considerations. And I'll kind of break this into three buckets here. Component one is public meetings. A project like this is not going to succeed without numerous public meetings. This includes workshops, trips to the Historic Resources Board, because a permanent program would include changing potentially the facades of historic commercial buildings, trips to the Planning Commission, because there will be ordinance work, zoning code, design guidelines, things like that. Of course, coming to the City Council at least once for adoption, but it'll be more than that. I think that's actually supposed to be a 3. I apologize. There'll be at least 3 City Council meetings because we'll be amending ordinances, which is at least 2 meetings, and I'm assuming you'd want to do 1 workshop at the City Council, ultimately culminating in a trip to the Coastal Commission because we would be amending zoning code, general plan, and our local coastal program. Component 2 is really policy decisions. I do differentiate this from regulatory considerations because these are high-level policy directions that we would need from you, the council, before we really get into crafting the regulatory updates. Things like, how does ownership work for a parklet on public land? Is it leased? Is it rented? Is it owned? Are we going to charge fees? Yes or no? What do those fees look like? What's the permitting framework? Is it a use permit? Is it an encroachment permit? How does insurance and liability work? And what scope of allowed businesses we'll be looking at? And what I mean by this, is it just restaurants? Is it wine tasting? Is it coffee shops? Do we open it to retail? We would have to explore all of those possible options. Component 3 are those regulatory considerations. And I did spend a little bit of time on this, but I could probably spend more time and find a few additional regulatory areas that would need to be addressed. But you can see I laid them out here. I did it in much more detail, and the staff report went into the language and what impacts it might have. But long story short, there are definitely sections of the zoning code that would need to be amended. General plan would require some amendments. There's specific policy language in there about how to use the outdoor areas and eating in them. Commercial design guidelines, we'll have to consider those. And of course, ultimately updating our local coastal program. So with that, we're here tonight really to look for direction from council. The big question is, should the permanent program, development of a permanent outdoor program, and this isn't a yes or no approving a permanent outdoor program. This is just a question, should staff begin working on this in earnest, developing this project, which in my estimation is going to be at least a year process. Should we begin working on that now, or should we wait until a later date? If you recall, this project is on the list of 30 projects that we discussed at our recent retreat with you. It is an important project, just like the rest of them that are on that list of 30. We currently have our top 16 list, but this is the council's list, and we can add if the council wants. I would ask for the direction. We would respectfully request the direction that if you want to add this to the right now list, meaning it's a priority and we're going to make large progress before the end of this calendar year. If there's any projects you would want to set aside that have similar bandwidth required to free up capacity, or we just add it as a 17 and then generally slow down the other ones. Just for frame of reference, I did put it in the staff report, but 8 of the 16 projects are managed out of the community planning and building department, and so this would fall into that department as well. So with that, I will end my presentation, but I am certainly available for questions as you deliberate on this.
Are there any questions of staff of Brian at this moment? Bobby?
Yeah, Brandon, so we just had that presentation from Nori. Would this impact, a decision on this tonight, would that impact what he's trying to accomplish with the guidelines?
You know, that's a wonderful question. Thank you. So we anticipate that at some point we will talk about this, and I don't like doing things twice. I think the design guidelines is an important project to work on right now, and so we've already started talking about how we treat the right-of-way as part of the design guidelines, and that means in the residential district and the commercial district. So our design guideline updates, regardless of whether there's a permanent outdoor dining program, is already going to address what do improvements in the right-of-way need to look like in the commercial district. This could be furniture, this could be plants, this could be changes to the fronts of commercial buildings. So my vision is that regardless of whether we're working on the outdoor seating program, those design guidelines will give us guidance in the future if it were to be installed. So we would know what those should look like. That they should work that way.
Thank you, Brandon.
Are there any questions of Brian before I open up to the public? Karen, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. You know, this continues to be described as outdoor dining. We already have outdoor dining. This is actually outdoor dining on the public right-of-way, to be more accurate. So I would appreciate that clarification in the future.
Is that a question?
And
Is that a question?
yes, can that be included in the future?
Yes. The answer to that question is yes.
Okay. Okay.
It's almost 5 o'clock in the morning here.
And I don't blame you.
She's doing very good, very good.
I'm trying to get this meeting over with as quickly as possible, so, no, I'm kidding you. Okay, thank you. Is there anything else, Karen? Nope, you
No.
keep going dark. Oh, well. All right, let's go ahead. Open up for public comment. There's an opportunity for any member of the public to comment on this item. 3-minute limitation on the testimony. If you'd state your name for the record, I'd appreciate it.
Ken White, and again, Carmel Residents Association. The comment we would like to give you is this issue is going to be a lightning rod issue in the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea. If you don't understand that, then you're not listening to your constituents. It would be a crime to, if you want to move it up to in category, that's fine. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about is you got to understand that your planning department and staff and commission are going to be doing their regular job as they usually do each day, and then you're going to add on Nori Winter's program, and you're going to hit this planning department with a lightning rod issue. I can speak from personal experience. We spent in the late 80s, Mayor Eastwood wanted a complete look at the general plan. I chaired the Planning Commission during that time. It was the most exhausting year I ever spent in my life because we did the normal Planning Commission business, and then we added on all the meetings that Nori Winter had, and we had to go to those because we had to hear the public. That's what you represent. You go and hear your public. And then we brought it back, and Brandon's right. The number of meetings the commission had to do on top of their normal workload is quite surprising, and you have to understand that. And it moves over to the city council members because you have to go to those public meetings also and hear your constituents talk. So you add that, and then your department head's going to, sooner or later, if it comes into their area of expertise, they're going to have to get involved. So their staffs are going to have to work. So you really want to understand what we're doing here. You can move it up in importance, but I sure as devil would not put it on the planning commissioner's plate right away. Let Nori Winters handle it if he can, if they feel they can. But don't saddle the planning department with this issue. You're going to wear them out. They're going to be tired. And I was exhausted at the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor White. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for your time. It's a little interesting that today, like we're talking about the outdoor dining, and we were just removed the temporary, and we were talking about the budget as well and the importance of the money to do work for the city. For me, it's unfortunate that we had an income. We could have just like postponed another year and had an income of over $700,000 between rent and extra tax revenue to really do a great job for the city. However, I respect your decision. For the outdoor dining, it goes simple to the new style that we discovered, the people that discovered how much they really liked the outdoor dining that fit Carmel-by-the-Sea. Going back to the survey that you made officially, and you saw that the majority want it. And to be afraid of hard work to do such a thing, I think this is not how we work in life. We don't say I can't because it's going to be hard. I think we should really do the job if it's good for the city and respond to what the citizen request, because the citizens of the city want it, majority want it. So it's all back about style and revenue. It's going to bring more revenue. This month, I don't know if you notice, I think I'm the most person downtown Carmel than a lot of people. We slowed down in business because we don't have outdoor dining. Every day we get so much people upset that we don't have. I'm sure you're getting notes on that. So I really encourage you to consider that and look at it as a change to the town. That's going to be better change. It's going to be more revenue by bringing more people to the town, and it's going to be better style. I completely believe in that, and we're here to support as well. However, on the side note, also you can individualize it. Like maybe you can do it. You don't have to do like everybody has to follow. You can just make it an individual request from certain restaurants that they wanted to do that. In the end, I just want to say a note from the heart that I originally came from a place that the government dictated things not based on what people want. And that was not a good place to live. I'm very proud to be in here where the government really follow what the citizen wants. And I am here to support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Ken Flaherty's. About 4 or 5 years ago, Mark, who was in charge of the Planning Commission at that time, had directed one of the planning directors, I think it was Ian, to come up with a committee that we were together for about 6 months, something like that, to come up with a third use. We presented it to council, and I have no idea why it disappeared. But we did a great job, and we eliminated a lot of work that could have been done, would have had to be done by planning commission. We came up with ideas that totally worked. The document still exists somewhere. And I really think that if you'd allow us to go ahead with some direction from, maybe somebody that likes somebody from the planning commission, from the planning commission, to sit on that and work with us a couple times a month. I think we could come up with some direction that may not look like what you might think it's going to look like. It may not be public encroachment. It may be something else. But we're the ones that know what we might like to see. And it can be done on an individual basis. And first of all, we don't even know if anybody wants to do it. Who wants to have, an encroachment on the street? Maybe they want it to be something different, but we're making it a lot, I think we're making it a lot harder than it needs to be for right now. And let us do the work, with some guidance from one of the planning directors. Somebody will go on that committee, and maybe Brandon could give us an hour or two a week. And it worked out really well, and we came up with a lot of stuff. So, and first of all, I'd like to find out if anybody wants to do it anyways. Maybe there's only 5 or 10 restaurants, I don't know. you know, there's a dollar involved and, you know, they may not want to do it. So, right now it sounds very heavy, but, sorry.
Thank you, Ken. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight on this topic? Zoom world or otherwise? Is anybody out in the Zoom land? I don't see anybody. I'll close the public comment period.
Yeah, Dave, I'd like to speak.
Okay, well, don't hesitate.
I won't. Good evening. My name is Graham Robertson. I'm a 56-year resident of Carmel-by-the-Sea. Since 1916, the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea has taken a very thoughtful, methodical, and unique approach to processes and decisions that change the look, character, and traditions of our village. One of the guiding principles is Ordinance 96, which you all know so well since you see it every time you're in city council chambers at City Hall. Over the years, the village has evolved and changed to become one of the jewels of California. This has not happened by mistake. We have design standards and a general plan that has guided past and present city councils over many decades. I applaud the hiring of Nori Winter to review the commercial and residential design standards. Well, I don't really understand why you're considering dining in the public right-of-way as one of your priorities. It's clear that Nori's scope of work should include the review of this concept. After all, the design standards would have to be amended to accommodate this change. In addition, the general plan would need to be amended. The Coastal Commission would need to weigh in on this significant change. The Alcoholic Beverage Control would need to be consulted. The Water District would need to analyze the potential increased seating. And most importantly, the commercial property owners would need to agree to this dramatic change. The design standards are currently being reviewed. The general plan needs to be reviewed and updated. If you truly believe that dining in the public right-of-way should be considered in the commercial district, please follow the processes that has enabled the village to attain the world-class reputation that you have the responsibility to protect. Otherwise, vote to discontinue the discussion of dining in the public right-of-way so that we can maintain the character of our village. After all, since dining in public right-of-way benefits so few businesses and has no benefit to the residents, I ask the question, why are you even having the discussion? Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Dave?
I'm at a disadvantage because I cannot see the public, so is there somebody out there in the Zoom world?
Yes.
Okay, could you identify yourself and then speak?
Yes. Mayor Potter, members of the council, my name is Cindy Lloyd. Following on Graham Robertson's comments, I was born in Carmel 80 years ago, which doesn't mean anything other than the fact that I'm old. And
that doesn't count.
No, it doesn't count for anything, except I'm old. At any rate, my view on this subject is that this is very premature to be considering this at this time. Nori Winter has a job ahead of him. The planning department has a huge job ahead of them. We as citizens have jobs ahead of us. The council has jobs ahead of us. And to tack this idea onto an already, I would say, impacted plan of action for the council and for the staff is just premature. Let Nori Winter do his job. The other concern I have is that we are talking about having a commercial business in the public right-of-way, and that needs to be considered. I understand that the restaurant owners want it, and I understand a lot of people want dining outside, but I can tell you that since the parklets have disappeared, it's been just a delight to be able to walk down the streets of Carmel, to look at the buildings, to drive down the streets and not be dodging all of the parklets. So I really hope that in order to maintain our village character, that this item at this time is not put forward. And I want to dovetail onto what Graham Robertson said. He said it all, he said it well. I don't need to say any more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Last call, guys.
Mayor, I don't see any raised hands.
All right, thank you, Ashen. All right, I'll bring it back to council, close the public comment period, bring it back to council for direction. I'd just like to state that this report did exactly what I wanted it to do, which was highlight the complexity of what it was before us. It's obvious that there's a lot of work associated with this. It's not on the top 10 priority list. And for that reason, my concerns are set forth that I really don't think it's the time right now. I do think that we can do it as a more inclusive project once we get Nori Winter's project out of the way. I'd like to see him stay on for a little while and go ahead and further address this issue. But for me, this report did exactly what I wanted to do. Let the public know this is not something simple that can be done capriciously. Involves a lot of work. So for that reason, I'm going to support leaving the priorities the way they are. Anybody else wishing to speak? Yes, Carrie.
Yep, I definitely want to commend Brandon for the report. This is part of the communication that needs to take place. So you laid it out very, and you're just hitting the surface, I think. You haven't dove in deep here, but I think there is a point of having Nori look at the commercial guidelines and design review and see if this can be a component of it. I think that this also falls in with the parking issue. And so I think the restaurants have to be a little patient, and they have to understand that this could be a bigger look of the commercial area. And so I agree with the mayor. I appreciate the report. I appreciate the complexity, and I think we need to wait for Nori to do what he needs to do with the community.
Bobby?
Yeah, I would echo that. I would want to wait to see what Nori wants to do with the general plan. However, I would like to answer one of the questions that was posed tonight, and that is why we're talking about this. And why, in my belief, why we are talking about this is because we had a serious ad hoc committee. We took a serious survey, not the one that the restaurateurs presented, but the one that we took maybe a year and a half or so ago. And there was a desire, there was a group of people, whether it was 40% of our residents or 60% of our residents, regardless of that, there was a group of people that wanted to explore outdoor dining. And so that is the only reason why I want to listen to this and why we're listening to it. But with that said, I want to move forward with our general plan before we move forward with outdoor dining.
Well said, thank you. Jeff or Karen?
Yes, I'd like to say something. While I've been in Europe, I've been really looking at some of the European dining. And I have to tell you, I don't think we're ready for this yet, this dining in the public right away, in the fact that our streets are narrow and our sidewalks are narrow, and we have a lot of traffic on them. Most of the outdoor dining that I've observed in the cities I've been in so far have been in lovely large plazas without trucks and garbage trucks and delivery trucks running next to you. I think that there are so many issues. I'm so glad to see some reality being brought into this conversation, because this is not simple. This involves all kinds of possible attachments, to historical buildings, widening of streets, all kinds of things that would need to be considered. And it's just great to actually get some reality. I do think there is still merit in taking a bird's eye view from a downtown master plan perspective that, like Carrie mentioned, takes in parking, takes in circulation, takes in the visitor experience, takes in the residential experience, how the people who live downtown are impacted by things. So it's a huge, huge issue, and I just don't think the time is right to dump this into the planning department when they are so focused right now on the design traditions. So Mayor Potter, I am happy to hear that you see the complexity as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Jeff, did you have any comments?
Yes, thank you. I agree with the comments of my four counterparts here. I would say, I think that I have a couple of comments, Brandon, on your plan. I think, the plan as in the document reads from left to right. It describes, the plan of the document describes a process for getting to a specific outcome. And I don't know if I'm on the same page with respect to the plan. We talk, when we talk about the planning documents that the city is sort of guided by, we start with the general plan. And I think that in a more appropriate way of thinking about how to go about this process, and I do think that there's a good chance that there is a place for outdoor dining in town. I don't know how to do it. I do think there's, Karen, dining in the public right-of-way. I think that we have to start with the general plan and decide, I'm reading, encourage outdoor eating areas that are in character with the design of the commercial district, do not adversely impact residential land uses, interfere with pedestrian or vehicular circulation, and result in a net increase in the amount of restaurant seating. I think we have to be satisfied ourselves with, that we're okay changing the general plan, that element of the general plan, before we go to the next step. I don't think it's a particularly legitimate process to say we're going to encourage outdoor dining. How do we modify the planning documents of the city to get to that point? I don't think that that's the right way of looking at the process, because I don't think that encourages the appropriate viewpoints from restaurants that already have outdoor dining on their property, or commercial facilities that might be impacted by the things that just general plan states. These things in the general plan, they're so amorphous. Sometimes it's hard for us to get our heads around what these things mean. But the fact is, I think that Graham was talking about, the general plan has sort of evolved to define the city. And I think that these changes to the general plan are really important. Which brings me to the second point, my second sort of comment on the process that you've outlined. It's really meeting heavy. There are a lot of meetings, and they are important meetings. And I'm worried, back when Dave and I were first elected and we had all those beach fire meetings, what we saw was we had 100 people at the first meeting, and then 50 people at the second meeting, and then 20 people at the third meeting. And by the time we got to meeting number 9, we were down to 4. And my concern with this meeting heavy schedule is that we will lose the public along the way. And we won't make the best decision that we could. And I don't know how to fix that. But I think that the draw of just outdoor dining to modify the general plan is not enough of a draw. And I agree with Karen that we need to figure out how to modify the general plan, how to do this sort of outdoor, this sort of look at the downtown. But I'm not sure that the public support for doing such a big project is there quite yet. Let's see how, I agree with my fellow council members and the mayor, let's see how the Nori Winter project goes first. Let's see how good we are at doing a planning project that is just as important, but maybe easier to do. We can learn from that process, and then we can come back to the outdoor dining, or the general plan modifications when we get to that point. So, thank you.
All right, that noted, is there any other discussion? I'd then move then, if there is no other discussion, that we provide direction to staff not to proceed with the effort as a city top priority project at this time. Second.
I second that.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Yashin, would you call a roll, please?
Councilmember Barron.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito.
Yes.
Councilmember Tice.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards.
Yes.
Mayor Potter.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous.
All right, thank you. All right, let's move on then to public hearings. This is continue. The next item is number 6, which is consideration to continue to June 7th, 2022. A recommendation from the Historic Resources Board of the City to the City Council that the City Council enter into a Mills Act historic property contract with Esperanza Carmel Commercial LLC for the historic Sundial Lodge known as Lobos, Carmel, located Monterey Verde 2nd, northwest of 7th Avenue. And I believe Councilmember Richards and I need to recuse ourselves of this. Is that correct? Yes.
And just real quickly, Mr. Mayor, we're just recommending you continue this to your June meeting.
Yeah. But I think because of my proximity to the property, I think I still have to recuse. Do I have to step out of the room or can I just be quiet?
You'll both need to leave the room. And that was both because of your proximities to the property. So the only item that appears here would be, based on the recommendation, would be a motion to continue this matter. It has to be continued to a date certain legally. So the proposed date is June 7th.
Why is it on this agenda? Question.
I
Like, why
believe
did
it's
it
because the
appear?
notice of the public hearing went out, most likely.
Yeah, you told us to bring it back on this date, so you originally
Okay.
continued it to this date specifically. But our homework assignment's not done yet, so we're recommending one more month.
Did we explain to the public why it's coming back? I mean, it's in the staff report, but I think,
Just, I can,
I
ma'am.
think there needs to be an explanation of why it's coming back.
Just real quickly, if I may, Counselor, the council told us to investigate two things: whether a Mills Act contract had to be adopted by resolution, and the city attorneys completed that homework. And the council also directed us to do some additional research on the tax loss, the property tax loss outside just the taxes that the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea receive. So that was the direction from you. And again, Mr. Pierrick has completed his homework. We haven't completed our homework yet.
So I move that we continue this item to June 7th, 2022.
I would.
There needs to be a second, otherwise it'll die for lack of a second. Can Karen hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
I'm a little bit confused because I thought on a 3-2 vote, this had gone ahead.
I can provide some explanation on that. The vote previously on this item was 2-1 in favor, and
Yes, you're right, 2-1.
Yes, and I indicated at the time that since it was a resolution that was included in the packet, that you needed to have a majority of the body, which would be 3. So then I was asked to do the legal research as to whether a resolution was necessary, and I did research it and found that a resolution was not necessary, so that a vote of 2-1 would be sufficient. So that dealt with the issue of the voting, and then the other issue that is indicated in the staff report was there was a need to get further information about the impact on city tax revenues.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
So that right now there's a motion, and I haven't heard a second. Well,
Maybe we should discuss this for a minute.
that would be appropriate.
Okay, so Karen, I am generally not in favor of doing this, as I expressed at the last meeting. I will vote in favor of continuing it because that is a procedural option. But if you and Councilmember Tice wish to proceed with this, I would ask that the two of you make the motion and second the motion, and then I will support it.
So, Karen, because
Yes,
we were voting on a resolution, the 2-1 did not pass the resolution because we needed a full majority.
Right.
So,
Okay, so
I am suggesting that we, with my motion, is that we continue this until June 7th to rehear it, and come back with the information that Jeff is asking in terms of the tax information to the county. That's my motion.
Okay. All right, I will second that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right.
Need a roll call?
Yes, Yasmin?
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Barron,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito,
Yes.
Councilmember Tice.
Yes.
It's a majority vote. The motion passes.
Somebody want to get the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, it's a good thing this wasn't written as a resolution, wasn't it?
Alrighty, this moves us to our last item of the night, which is Resolution 2022-041, adopting fiscal year 2022-2023 fee schedule for administrative services, community planning and building, public safety and public works services. Robin or Chip, which one of you wants to? No.
Russell's going to present, Mr.
Russell,
Mayor, and he's
okay.
got a few slides we'll breeze through. I think we've got an answer to a question that Mr. Barron posed yesterday, so yeah, it should be pretty cut and dried.
Russell, welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
I'm looking to your first
I can't open the
presentation.
presentation here. I'm trying to- Oh, there you go, thank you. Okay. Honorable Mayor Potter and members of the City Council, good evening. It's a pleasure to present to you. What you have before you is Resolution 22014, and that all has to do with the adoption of the fee schedule for 2022 and 2023. This comes to you contemporaneously with the budget, and it should every year, because what you will find in the budget, if you look at charges for services, is fees in the amount of about 2.2 million, and it's really underpinned by the fees that are in this particular resolution. You also have two amendments, exhibits here attached tonight. Exhibit A basically presents all the general fees for the city. It includes community planning, building fees, and other sundry fees that the city charges during the year. And you'll also see Exhibit B, which presents building and safety fees that are it augments the general fee schedule. And these are fees that are specific to building plan check and building inspection fees. So in terms of background, the city went through an analysis of fees back in 2015, and that's quite an exhaustive study that was done back then, basically to determine what the full labor costs and indirect costs are for fees. That study was updated in March of 2020, and given the timing of that study, last year's fees for 21-22 were not changed because that study was so close to the time of those fees. This year, we are bringing back the fees, and as allowed per ordinance, we are updating the fees for the local area CPI, and the CPI this year applied to it is 4.2%. And you will see that reflected on Exhibit A for all the fees on the exhibits. We are not proposing any change to Exhibit B. Those are building and safety construction value fees. And the reason why we're not proposing those be changed, there will be an update and refresh to the study in 22-23. The dollars for that study are in the budget. And those value fees are based on construction valuation, and it's best to modify those all at one time under a different methodology. So with that said, the fee study before you basically presents the general user fees for update at a rate of 4.2% for your consideration and approval this evening. This tonight's report does not include market-based fees for facility rentals, and that's purposeful. Those will come back to council at a later time. Those include fees as the Norton Garage fees as well. And in general, market-based facility rental fees are really spoken to under a different category of fees, because they are not tax-based fees, so to speak. So having said that, Really, staff recommends the continuation of full cost recovery for charges for services as indicated in the fee schedules that are attached. We did apply the CPI schedule, which happens to be the San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward CPI, and it's 4.2% this year. That was the CPI that covered the range of December 20 through December 21. And as you look forward to next year, we'll do the same thing. We'll take the same time frame and apply the CPI at that time as well. This meeting was noticed on April 22nd, and the new fees will become effective on 7/3, just in time for the issuance of the new budget. So with that, we're here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Russell. Appreciate it. Well done. Is there any questions of staff or council at this time?
Yes, one quick question. When can we expect to see those market-based fees come back to council? Next month with the budget? We've increased the Norton fees this time every year, right? So this year we're not going to.
No, no, sir. I think you've asked that question in the past couple of budget years. Russell, do you know when we'll do the fee for the market-based, the study for the market-based fees?
My understanding is they're being analyzed by the Community Activities Department, and they will come back under separate cover. So it's really under your direction, City Administrator, as to when they could come back. But I would suspect soon into 22, 23.
Yes, I'll check with Ms. Wright, and I'll tell you individually at our updates.
Yeah, I think last year we had this discussion, and I remember we had a little bit of a conversation about the fees, and it came. I'm fairly certain it came back the next month. We had a conversation about $100 or $200, and it came back. And so I would express my hope that the parking fee, you know, I do think we've gotten into the habit of just bumping it up every year until we get to sort of the point at where we should be. And I would hate to see us sort of lose that procedural momentum at being able to do that.
Recognizing one of the questions, questions, or any other questions by council members? Okay, I'll open it up to the public. Is there any member of the public wishing to speak on this item tonight? Not terribly surprised. Okay, I'll close the public comment period, bring it back to council for direction. Council members, your thoughts?
I have one question, Dave.
I'm sorry, Karen.
Has there been yes, I have a question.
Sure.
Has there been any analysis of whether the increase in fees for tree permits has resulted in any illegal tree removals and tree pruning? I see an awful lot of companies I don't recognize working around town, and I just wanted to know if anybody has looked at that. I don't want to encourage people to do illegal trimming and pruning and removal if we can help it.
No, ma'am, we don't have an analysis of that. What I can tell you, in a very positive note, is that we're very close to hiring our second code compliance coordinator, which will be active in the village, proactive, looking for these kinds of issues and coordinating with the other departments. So, but no, ma'am, we didn't drill down that far. But I certainly hear what you're saying. If fees get to a point where, perhaps the risk of getting caught outweighs the cost of the permit. I don't think we're at that point yet, but I'll talk to Mr. Harari and Russell and Brandon and discuss that with them.
Karen, is that satisfying? Okay, good. All right, council, let's get this moving. Does we have a motion to approve?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2022-41.
Second.
Right. A second motion, a second. Any other discussion? Could we, Yashin, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Barron.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito.
Yes.
Councilmember Tice.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richard.
Yes.
And Mayor Potter.
Aye.
Vote is unanimous.
And that brings us to the end of our work for the evening. Is there anybody wishing to add items for future agendas for discussion? I don't see anybody.
I'd just like to remind us that smoking in the downtown area has come up, and that should appear on a future agenda sometime.
All righty, we'll take note of that and we'll consider that. All right, well, we stand adjourned. Thank you all, guys. I want to say, really well done tonight. I really appreciate that. A lot of work. We got it done in a reasonable time, and the public was very respectful. Much appreciated.
Yes, I think I'll go to breakfast.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Carrie.
That was a pretty heavy-duty agenda. Yeah. No. No,